that is not a beer, but I am going to need a Red Bull for this one, for a lot of memories and a lot of focusing. Welcome into the Section 109 podcast. My name is Breezy. If you're listening for the first time, welcome. I am joined by Matthew, by Jim, by Sir Mix-a-Lot sleeping to my left. Toby is a little scared of loud noises, and I think he's hiding under the couch. Bobble Juan, the GOAT, is right here, and we are here to talk about and take a stroll down memory lane. It's been a long time since we've had to go back down this memory lane, Matthew, and I'm a little excited, and also kind of it's wild to talk about it. Boys, how we feeling? Are you guys ready to talk Eastridge and Chattanooga, the Red Wolf story, the Chattanooga FC story, intermingling USL, all the things?
This is the story of Chattanooga soccer. It is one part of a larger story that is the Soccer Warz. And I think making this only a Chattanooga story leaves out that there is a lot bigger of a thing going on, which is that outsiders, people doing things for their own personal and professional and financial gain, have always been mucking up American soccer. Everyone wants it all for themselves. Mm-hmm. And the story of Chattanooga is no different. The story of Chattanooga is interesting because there was a full-on war. In most other cases, the smaller side just folds. And whether that's in Birmingham or in Memphis or in Nashville or wherever else, when the big dog rolls in, the little dog just gives up. That's the story of San Diego. That's going to be the story of Indianapolis. Like it or not, that's just the reality. The Chattanooga story is exceptional because someone fought back. And we can talk about why, I guess, at some point. But that's how I would open this podcast.
Why are we the right ones? Or why do we feel compelled to tell this story? Jim, do you think? Or why do you feel like
three of us? Or
in particular. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's past time that the story has been told. I mean, there are little bits and pieces that are have made it out into, maybe via newspaper articles or people tweeting things. But the whole story itself is not really out there. But there are several narratives that still kind of emanate. I mean, even as recent as this week or last week, there were posts on message boards, on Discord servers, claiming to say this, that, or the other thing about what happened here. Normally, little bits and anecdotes are used by people to advance their own theory of the Soccer Warz, and Chattanooga becomes a nice way to start that conversation. And so, but there's just a lot of, I think there's a lot of stories out there that just frankly aren't true, and people just don't understand the emotion that the blue side of this area has towards this. They see it as irrational. Some people, and even to the point of other podcasters, other people in lower league soccer media, just completely not understanding why Chattanooga makes decisions that it makes. And
the city, you mean?
No, I mean the club.
Oh, our club.
Yeah, our club.
Yes.
And
when you say decisions,
well, like the move to Next Pro.
Yes.
That's the easiest decision the club's ever made.
I understand that, but one of the reasons why it's an easy decision is because of what we're going to talk about, and
what almost happened and what could have happened, and
right.
how close to the brink that we came.
Right, and so yes, this is 2018 we're talking about, but people talk about this it comes up every time anything involving USL and promotion relegation and anything. When the NASL case was finally.
And as USL is currently positioning themselves as independent soccer.
Yes, yeah.
Which is the smart thing to do for them. But it's a role reversal from MLS. Right now, MLS is the big bad corporate thing, but USL was the big bad corporate thing. And it's only a marketing position and even a business position. But USL are not the good guys.
No, and I guess,
nobody, to be clear, is the good guys. But
I guess I'll answer. Why the three of us? Well, the two you guys, as far as the civilians, you've got way more of the. You've known the folks. You have been involved since the beginning of the club, and know all the primary movers of what we're going to be talking about. I was radicalized by this experience. I mean, if you go back and look at my fandom from 2010 to 2017, I liked soccer, and so Chattanooga was our club, and so I went and fell in love with the club, and but I was not involved in the sense that I am now, and. My first inclination, I knew that USL was talking about a D3 league. I mean, I think they made that announcement in
2017,
April of 2017.
Yeah.
Shout out to your. So Jim had put together a lot folders of articles about this, and it was nice to go back through those. And I didn't read every piece, but it was nice to go back through and kind of piece together stuff. But that was a date I looked up.
Yes.
That was when they first announced.
Yeah. So there was that announcement, and so I knew about that, but I had no idea what really that meant in terms of. The world of soccer. And so I came about this through really someone who was on the outside, just a supporter, just somebody who went to matches. And through this experience, I know way more than anybody should really want to know now about how this American soccer sausage is made. And so I grew up in this stuff, and so I think that's why the three of us are good to talk about it. You guys lived it in a way that I didn't live it. I had to go back and revisit a lot of stuff in order to kind of catch up to where things were, and in doing so, learned a lot. That's just out there publicly, that you don't have to know the people. You don't have to. And I don't know that a lot of our supporters, well, hopefully a lot of you haven't done what I've done, because there's a certain level of insanity and neurosis involved.
One of us.
But yeah, so I think that's a long way of saying that. I think we're the right people to talk about it.
I think it's interesting you say that. You were just a fan and this radicalized you. In a lot of ways, I was around from season 1, but I was just a fan, just a Cheddar hooligan, truly. I didn't even organize I wasn't even involved in Cheddar hooligan leadership at all.
Yeah,
that's not something I was I was doing. I was just the guy who brought champagne to tailgates
in a suit, by the way, usually a suit jacket at least,
and so this also, I had thoughts and opinions, and I've written stuff in the past about, the what I thought were failings of American soccer, especially right after the loss in Cuba to Trinidad and Tobago, and missing the World Cup.
Mm-hmm.
I read a long piece about how American soccer was not in a good place, and I think that mostly holds up. I also wrote a long piece back in probably 2017 as well about how I thought, USL was a dumpster fire.
Mm-hmm.
In some ways, it has grown up so much because the people who own it don't run it anymore. They have competent soccer people running things over there now, and I think greatly to their benefit. But like USL was a shit show. The NASL was dead / in the process of dying dead. And there was the NISA 1.0 dream of like, what if there was a league for clubs that like just wanted to play ball and like work together and like organize themselves instead of paying, millions of dollars to some asshole in Tampa. Right. Now I think looking back, we all can see that this is really hard. The business of soccer is really hard. And, it turns out you don't like what you want, what is good is not achievable. Mm-hmm. That the biggest lesson I think that we have learned, and I use the collective we as in like the two of you in this room and the club in general, is that ideal never existed in the end. And I think that's what makes the move to MLS Next Pro, which is viewed in most of American soccer circles as totally anathema to like what CFC used to stand for.
Exactly.
Like it isn't independent soccer. It's joining with the big bad wolf. It's joining in the quote unquote reserve league of the big bad wolf. But like what's most important and what's always been most important for CFC.
And the only thing that matters to Chattanooga.
Yeah. The only thing that has ever truly mattered in the end is to use soccer as a tool to make Chattanooga a better place across creed, sex, all the things, socioeconomic status, to use soccer as a tool to make the community better.
And you can't do that if you're dead.
And you can't do that if you're dead.
And the best platform currently for us that we are both allowed to enter and has the most stability, and you can couch that however you want, but there's more billionaires in MLS, and MLS Next Pro is not going anywhere.
I mean, I'll couch it in a completely different way for some of our friends that might be listening from across the USL aisle. And I don't mean in East Ridge. I mean like just kind of nationally. MLS is going to win. Papadakis and Rob Hoskins back in 2007 or whatever it was, 2008, bought USL, the league, from Nike. They are going to sell the damn league one day. And everything that has happened since and everything that will happen post today is just negotiating the price. Everything. ProRel, Division 1, it's negotiating the price. It's a response to MLS all of a sudden pulling their two teams out of the league, creating their own league, allowing independence into that new league. It's plucking off the upper echelon of markets and teams and not compensating USL for them. San Diego Loyal is dead because MLS refused to let the San Diego Loyal join up, because Papadakis was not about to get his payout on the upward mobility fee. Yeah. That's why it is. That's why Indy 11 will die. Straight up. You can't stop that from happening.
Assuming MLS goes there.
Sure, I guess, whatever.
And a lot of people will see what you just said as cope on the part, or as we are rationalizing, we are being hypocritical, but we're not acknowledging those things. And people have walked away from seeing CFC as a model or as an idea that is important for American soccer, because they think that the club was hypocritical, that the supporters are hypocritical, and many people will listen to what you just said and said, well, that's just those Chattanooligans just making excuses and not living the values that they said that they held for 10 years. And that's another reason why I think this is important.
Yeah, I'll give where I think you're going with that, which is like, I'm not defending MLS. Like what I will say is that like it sucks anytime a community loses its soccer team,
100%,
or a soccer team that a community is based around loses their soccer team. But USL is not pure in this. And if you're coming at this from a USL side of the aisle and you're looking at us and you're like, yeah, look at what MLS is doing. Two wrongs don't make a right. USL.
No shit. It's just a bigger fish.
The story of this, the story of Chattanooga in large.
Sorry, I'm trying not to cuss this podcast.
Yeah, you're not doing good. The story in large part of this, and we'll start getting into what happened and go through all of it, is that USL, a entity that was unrelated to us, who we had conversations with, spoiler alert, as a club, and opted to not follow their business model, decided, cool, we don't give two anythings, censored myself there, about what you want, about what you have. We want what you have. We want your market. We want your fans. We want your money. And if you're not going to give it to us when we're nice about it, then we're going to take it by force. And again, spoiler alert, we'll get into this right at the beginning. They said that part. That wasn't the quiet part. They said the quiet part out loud. They said that out loud.
And it's not the only time they didn't just say it once. It happened multiple times here. And if you are listening from around the country and your team was previously existed and then eventually moved to USL, whether it was your team or another one, chances are they said it to yours too.
And that's not
because I know they did, because I'm a member owner of a club that will remain nameless that moved over to PDL.
Lost their purity check as well.
And they said it to them too. Like, we know this happened. We know this is like it's a one-trick pony type thing.
And MLS will do what USL did, and like there's a grander problem here, and this podcast is not meant to solve. We're getting a little bit philosophical, but it's not meant to solve the American soccer landscape issue. Like
I don't know if it is solvable.
It's probably not. What we're going to do though now is tell a story of what happened, and if you think we don't have sympathy, like, we do have sympathy, but if you come at us from a moral purity angle and you say you guys are no longer morally pure because you joined the bad side, here's why we are still morally pure. From my point of view, the only moral purity we need is what is best for the city and of Chattanooga, and what is best for Chattanooga's community. And if you think that CFC could have survived by going to some high school when we got kicked out of Finley Stadium, which is something that comes really close to happening in this narrative, could have gone to some high school and just been an amateur team, a Sunday league team, sure, the three of us probably would have gone along and supported that. But CFC would not have the platform to have all of the things that it does in the way that it makes soccer and makes Chattanooga better, the city and the community better through soccer. It wouldn't have the double-digit marriages that have come out of the community that surround CFC because of CFC. It wouldn't have all of these amazing things because it wouldn't have the platform to build for. We build from the MLS platform in spite of a lot of the bad things that MLS does. On this podcast, I make a lot of jokes about not knowing what MLS 1 is because I don't care. What I care about is Chattanooga Football Club and what we do and where we play. And we play in Chattanooga. We are about Chattanooga. And if you can't see why the Royal made a difficult decision to go to MLS Next Pro because it was the thing that let us survive and continue making Chattanooga better through soccer, I can't help you. And you don't have to agree with it, but I think if you can't rationalize and understand why, then I think you're not trying hard enough.
Yeah, I mean the nerve that some people have had to say that the club should have allowed itself to die instead of making this decision.
How about those thousands of kids that get free after-school programs through soccer that help them that helps the most vulnerable kids? That thing should have just died on the vine so that we could have a purity test about we're pure of soccer. Yeah. Get out of here. Anyway, I don't want to get mad starting this podcast.
I'll go one step further and then we'll start diving in. You can't serve your community if you don't end up winning.
Going full lobbyist right now, aren't you?
You have to win.
Yeah.
MLS Next Pro, through MLS, is going to win. And it sucks that you're not here with us yet. But you will be one day. Most of you. Well, if you're sporting Jacksonville, you need to go to the South. Don't be in town if you know what's good for you.
All right. Let's move into Matthew. Why don't you take the first this first paragraph here of our story, and you can read the paragraph or you can summarize. You can do whatever you want.
Well, let's paint a little bit of a background here because this story the story of CFC and the story of all of the conversations leading up to the summer of 2018 really start, I think, on one of the more memorable nights in club history. It was early August, National Premier Soccer League playoff final. CFC hosting Cosmos B. Electric atmosphere, electric game. Ends in a 2-3 loss after extra time. And, the previous year, and CFC had been to 2 finals prior, losing them both. But it was an opportunity.
Still hurts.
It was an opportunity. Wait, did I say 2? I meant 3 finals prior.
Yeah.
It was an opportunity to really showcase. It was the only final we ever hosted. And, I think everyone remembers the story of 18,227 fans. And it wasn't just the 18,000 on that night. It was the 12,000 the week before. It was the 9,000 the week before that. It was like the 7,000 the week before that. It was the buildup. It was the crescendo. That was coupled at the same time with the U.S. women coming in the week after on the start of their World Cup victory tour. Soccer in Chattanooga was what was like for a short stretch there was the center of soccer in the country. Other places, other cities, other teams had been there kind of first, had been drawing some good crowds, had been doing some things. But, the 2014 season, and really like CFC's entire existence of like having fans at all for this amateur team that plays 5 home games a year, it put American soccer on notice. And I'm not just going to blow like smoke here. CFC inspired teams in Asheville, North Carolina, inspired the now USL Championship team in Detroit, Michigan, inspired a team in Little Rock, inspired teams all over the place. And it wasn't just the amateur teams back then. Without CFC, there is no Atlanta United. MLS does not begin to even think that American soccer will succeed in the Southeast. In football, mad, the Southeast.
In SEC country.
It wouldn't have even ever crossed their minds. The team in Charlotte FC, does not exist. Nashville does not exist. Even like your USL Championship teams, Birmingham Legion does not exist. Memphis 901 also does not exist, literally today.
Currently.
But like would not have existed.
R.I.P.
CFC is the club and Chattanooga is the city that makes all of that possible. That inspires so many people to do their own teams. That inspires through the business metrics that things are possible in the Southeast of the United States. And it takes off from there.
And it's that game that shows everybody. Like, it's that 2015 game.
It's like the culmination of all of that showing
Because
everybody.
anyone
Atlanta United had been to multiple games, and they were there for that night. Atlanta United had just been announced, or I think earlier in 2015. They were at all kinds of games that 2015 season. Atlanta United, they wanted to know that if they were going to do this thing right, if they were going to make this thing special, they wanted to know why so many people in the small city just up the road cared. It was an integral part of the formulation of Atlanta United. And it all happened because of a club that was just playing amateur ball in the summers.
So, and I will put this
resonated in the community.
I'll put this in the show notes, but we did an episode early on in this podcast. So apologies. It's a lot of different podcasts at the time. It's just on audio. But it was with Sheldon Grizzle and Thomas Clark. And it talked about the founding of CFC. And we don't have time to go through that whole period, but I'll sum it up to say, like, they wanted to found something cool and like something fun, and they caught lightning in a bottle. And that's a thing that like Tim Kelly has said in a million interviews, like it's lightning in a bottle. But they didn't intend necessarily, and this comes into kind of the next little chapter of this, they didn't intend to found a professional soccer team or a team that would become a professional team. Many teams now are founded with much different intentions, and there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. There's many amateur teams that are founded, and then, I mean, we just played one in Corpus Christi. I don't know how they were founded, but they are intending to go pro, and they haven't been around a super long time. There are many teams now founded in the NPSL, the PDL, the UPSL, pick your alphabet soup, that intend to build a following and go pro. And CFC was never that. Mm-mm. And so around this time, though, 2014, 2015, and especially 2016, the conversations are ongoing amongst the CFC founders and board and supporters too. I remember asking these questions. So I was radicalized before the two of you were. I've not been around, oddly enough, as long as you guys have. My first game in 2014. I was aware of CFC's existence. I was living abroad when it was founded. I came back and then I was working during the summers. I never made a game until 2014. But I was asking from the minute I got there, like, when are we going pro? And I remember everyone talking during this period on like, we're gonna miss out. And I think this is the key theme. Like, we had lightning in a bottle and magic, quote unquote, or whatever you want to call it. And everyone's starting to go pro around us. Memphis, MPSL team, quote unquote, goes pro. And I'll put some quotes there because, like, you know, USL definitely just came in on top.
Yeah, they didn't go pro. They got
pro
absorbed.
Here's the thing. I'm not going to criticize the fans there, though, because those fans did end up supporting that USL team. So whatever happened in that market happened differently than ours because those fans chose to find some authenticity or some resemblance of whatever within that club. So I just don't want to get too...
Same with Birmingham.
Right, that's where I'm going. So I just want to say, like, USL is the bad guy in a lot of ways, but, like, whoever the local ownership group, like, there's things that happened in those cities differently than how they happened here, where people switched. And I'm not going to pretend to know why exactly. I don't live there. I'm not from there. But Memphis went pro. And I don't know if this is the order, but Memphis goes pro. Birmingham goes pro. Nashville does the worst ever pro bounce around, but they go pro, right? And I have some thoughts on them, obviously. Atlanta's had a myriad of different teams, so no team actually goes pro from there, but Atlanta gets their pro team.
Well, that's Silverback's erasure, but like I wouldn't call them pro either. Just because they played in the NASL does not mean they were a pro team.
As I think Lizzo said, I said what I said. Anyway, I'm not going to quote the rest of that line. But I think at that time there was a lot of chatter and and I don't mean just like rumors. I mean, everyone was going like, we have something special here. We can break the mold. And then a lot of people are like, why aren't we in MLS? Big MLS, which is a little crazy, obviously, but like. And I think I know the founders and board at that time they saw and felt the same thing. This was the reality for us. What were we going to do and what were the next steps? So something starts to happen in that period of time. And one of the interesting parts about, not only have Matt and I've been way too much on the inside of a lot of this, like of knowing people, we've talked to so many people that were inside of basically every room during this. I don't know if anybody has a clearer picture of what actually happened, aside from those that in the room. But I think in talking to those people, what has become clear to me over the years and at the time is that everybody wanted to go pro in some way, but there was an extraordinarily big disagreement on how to do that and if it was possible. And that's kind of like the genesis as we start going through of what then happens next. Because I think if you know that like there was a disagreement, which people from the outside may not know, there was a disagreement among people which way on the board to go. Mm-hmm. Which way. We know that we talked to the USL, and Matt can give some context here in a second that we know about those conversations. We know that we talked to the NASL, which eventually folded, so it was not an option, but we weren't going to go into the NASL.
The NASL was the furthest down the pecking order because of how poorly it was run, how expensive it was to operate within. And
there were owners in that league that were just willing to lose absurd amounts of money in the chase of sporting glory, and it was a bad idea for us.
Importantly, like how sustainable it wasn't for our own club.
I mean, it folded pretty quick.
It took a couple years, but like, and part of that was because USL was recruiting owners off of NASL. Just they were
recruiting them back.
Yeah. Now, at the same time as all of this is going on, there were conversations with USL. It never got down. It never got close. It never got to like, I'm pretty confident that there wasn't even like a term sheet or anything like that. It was like what they're proposing was not acceptable.
Well, and they were
because
they were a hot mess.
They were a hot mess.
It was for those that don't. This is 9 years ago, 8 years ago, maybe even 10 years ago in some of these conversations. USL was an extraordinarily different league at that time. The USL second division right now, for all that we don't love USL, the USL second division is a good league and a stable league with like real teams and real fan bases. It
wasn't that.
It wasn't then. And USL third division, which was they were and then had just becoming second division like through the stuff.
They were a third division league at the time.
Yeah.
So here's a few things we know about that period of time. That I think
2012 is the first time that Alec Papadakis makes an approach to CFC. It's also the first time that and I'm going to paraphrase, that the idea of, well, if CFC doesn't come over, and he didn't specify pro, to my knowledge, it could have just been like a NPSL to PDL thing, which was happening even back then, and in both directions, was like, CFC needs to be on our platform.
And the NPSL and PDL were both amateur leagues, for anyone who doesn't know.
And if it doesn't, then we're just going to take your market.
And by take your market, he meant, and again, we're paraphrasing here, but he meant we'll put a team
in your market. We'll take it.
And so we know that approach happened multiple times.
Yes. That was not the last time.
And so during that period, we know that CFC had conversations with Atlanta United about... because Atlanta United wanted a 2-team in the USL, and they were interested in it being us, and it didn't end up being a good fit, thank goodness, but that wasn't a good fit at that time. We know that we talked to the USL about entering as an independent, but again, wasn't a good fit. And
I want to go one step. Well, let's talk about, like, there was also a NISA thing going on, NISA 1.0.
Yes.
Which was a good,
but that was
kind
like
of
16.
That was 2017.
17.
Yeah, so these conversations last multiple years and there are multiple iterations. Sure. But 17 is when we're talking to everyone at the same time, essentially. But NISA emerges as the front runner.
And I will say, I think it's because again, I was not paying attention the way I do now then, and I think it's really important because you'll hear this from people who left CFC and go and have started to support the other side, the East Ridge. You'll hear it from them a lot. You'll hear it from other folks. Like 15, 16, 17, I'll say up until 16, the momentum of the club was up. It was going up every year from 10, 11, 12, all the way to 16.
Exponential growth.
And then I remember 17 ending that season as a supporter, somebody who just goes to 6 games or whatever, thinking like we're treading water here. I mean, it's just I don't know. I can't explain it other than in the stands, it felt like we had plateaued and we are that something else needs to happen.
We had plateaued because we didn't have the playoff run.
Yes.
Because those regular season attendances or whatever matched up fairly well. Mm-hmm. It was that there was no big playoff run and no big crescendo.
Yeah.
That we got to experience.
It felt like
we were ready to take the next step. When is something else going to come?
But I'm talking from somebody who had no idea what those other things might be, because it wasn't until like 8, I think. Well, it was right around the same time, I guess. Beginning of that season is when USL had said we're thinking about doing a D3 league.
But by that point in time, in 2017, the efforts had really coalesced around like what could Peter Wilt's vision for NISA be?
Yeah, and so that's when I first heard of that. I think it's important for folks to realize that not only were folks who deep in the inside feeling that there was something
Yes.
I think just the random person in the stands who cared about CFC felt like there was something missing, or there was something that needed to happen with the club.
So I think Matthew called it in this show doc that is pretty long and pretty detailed. Called us rudderless.
Yeah.
He said the feeling was rudderless.
Yes.
And part of that was because losing early in 2017 and the results of 2017 not being good enough, not being up to our standard, it was our first real setback year on the field.
Yeah,
so
we didn't make the playoffs that year, right?
We made like the play-in game of the playoffs,
Okay.
and
we lost.
promptly lost.
Yeah, that's the 2-1.
Yes, that is Chukka Aru doing Chukka Aru things through our defense, which I still remember.
I wish you had reminded me.
That was like that year is kind of like that year is the danger year that can happen to any American soccer team.
Right. Sure.
Which is like the first time you're like the first time like the positive feelings, the positive vibes turn. Mm-hmm. And that, by the way, it was financial. It was like playoff runs could help cover over like the what are we doing next? And so that season also was incredibly short. We played Atlanta at the beginning of February or whatever it was. And then we didn't really do anything until May again. Mm-hmm. And then the season was cut short because there wasn't 4 or 5 successive weeks of playoffs, that it felt like, and then there was no pro movement until there was that one announcement, I think in August of 2017, about NISA 1.0.
Yeah.
But that was, we knew at the time, and I think it was communicated well at the time, that like it was very tenuous still, because they only had 8 teams. They were hoping to launch with more. They weren't sure if it was going to happen in 2018 or 2019.
It was supposed to be 2018, but then it became, it was unsure.
But like then Jack Cummings dies, like not terribly long after that, and he was kind of more of the business brains behind Wilt's soccer vision.
He also, I believe, had a business arm that they were going to like help with consulting and putting together,
which ends up being the Club 9 Sports that we knew all too well by the end.
But it wasn't him running it anymore.
Right. So and that, like when Cummings dies, it all falls apart. The Milwaukee group the Milwaukee group picks up Peter Wilt. They actually launch in the Division III USL League in Madison. Mm-hmm. That becomes Forward Madison. I don't remember if the Omaha group was if that was Jonathan Cholera's Bug Eaters or not. Or if that ended up becoming Union Omaha. It was not Union Omaha.
No,
I know that for a fact. So it might have been what became the Bug Eaters. But like all that time, like 2017 was about, can we make this NISA thing work? Mm-hmm. USL is in the rearview mirror. And one of the things that makes USL in the rearview mirror that is not known publicly until now, I guess, is that multiple USL teams at that point in time told us, do not join this league. They threw open the books for us, just as CFC would throw open the books for those looking to start a summer amateur team. They threw open the books for us and said, look at this balance sheet. This is an insane idea. You guys are sustainable. Soccer in this country is in a precarious place in terms of pro soccer. You have a good thing going here. Like, don't screw that up. Like it's not ready for, like, this thing isn't ready for you. Like, don't join us. Do not do it. And I think that's really important to know. USL's own organizations were telling us not to join. And and I didn't know that until not terribly long ago. So NASL was not an option. USL teams, which, by the way, like, more than half of the teams in USL in 2015 have folded since. Mm-hmm. And I mean, like, more than half of the non-MLS2 teams, which I think says a lot. USL teams were telling us don't join USL. And then NISA was an idea, but was very clearly not ready yet. And spoiler alert, NISA 2.0 was never ready.
R.I.P.
So
in pieces.
like from the outside back then, and I remember being very frustrated about like what we were doing. Like there is no momentum. Like there's no forward progress here. And there was a good reason for that.
So, and the other thing that was happening behind the scenes too is there was an effort to put together an NPSL version or NISA version. Like there was kind of two, because there was enough teams in the NPSL, and then several of which then left for the NISA project that wanted to do what became the NPSL Members Cup. But there was Miami, there was us, there was Detroit, there was the Cosmos, which some of us still ended up doing it. But there was this big group of Oakland that wanted to do a pro thing and wanted to do it differently. Nobody at the time, although a bunch of them have joined USL as one of the only options that was out there, like they wanted to do something different.
Hell yeah, brother.
Hell yeah, brother, NPSL Pro. And in fact, there's a fun
Part of that.
I'll put his fun Twitter thread from that period of time in the show notes as well. If those of you who haven't watched it or have watched, it's just a wonderful read.
Part of that NPSL Pro project kind of picks up out of the dust of NISA 1.0. It includes a couple of teams like us that were interested in doing it. That carries over from fall of 2017 into the spring of 2018.
When they're trying to put it together. They didn't play in that period. They're trying to put it together.
And we also had the summit. I mean, the summit in that.
So in March of 2018, we hosted what was called the Summit for American Soccer. And from the outside looking in and knowing a little bit of what it was about, it certainly had something to do with trying to start and harness the grassroots kind of like revolution that was happening everywhere. You know, we're getting so many, as Matt alluded to earlier, CFC regularly opened its books for other amateur teams. It's one of the reasons Detroit City exists. One of the reasons that, because they wanted to know how to do it, and we helped give them a blueprint, and they've gone and done their own thing. We opened them for Asheville. We've opened them for many, many teams. And I think we kind of opened it for everybody in a lot of ways through that Summit for American Soccer. But as a part of that Summit for American Soccer that they did at the beginning, we were already starting to explore doing a supporter ownership raise and I was looking through my emails, I can't find it. I was sent an early pitch deck as like hey, please don't tell anybody. Sorry, I'm telling people now. The guy doesn't work here anymore. It's with Sean McDaniel. But it was like, hey, tell me your feedback on this. We're thinking about like putting this out to supporter owners. Obviously, this became the thing that the Sheldon Grizzle headed up and did later on. But like we're all exploring these options to how to go professional, how to get this runway, and how to do it on our own terms. Because we didn't like the USL options, we didn't like to do whatever else. Matthew, your note in here, I took that quote directly out of an article.
Well, that article was wrong because he was very dead by then.
Okay. I'll leave that alone. It doesn't matter.
It probably meant false up 2017.
Perhaps. What I will say is that part is not germane to this. So it's just a note I had in here about a timeline thing. But there's a thing that also people don't know that I knew at the time, and I'm comfortable talking about now a little bit. And hopefully nobody will dislike this take. And I don't mean you guys, I mean the people involved. But like the CFC board at the time was very conflicted on which way to go. And there were two factions, and there were kind of the figureheads of these two factions. And this was like a disagreement that was well enough known at the time that I knew about it at the time. And like and I know about it now. So it was basically like you had Sean McDaniel on one side, you had Tim Kelly on the other side, and then you had 8 board members total plus Bill Nuttall. And so Matt and I at the time knew enough we could kind of like count the votes, so to speak, on who wanted to go which way.
I was counting votes.
And so one of the things that was happening during this period of time is that everybody thought we should go pro. And I know we're harping on this a lot, but I think it sets the stage but there was very different ideas on how to do it. Sean viewed, and again, there's a little bit of paraphrasing in here and me kind of jumping into his head, but he viewed USL as the only viable option because it was a pro league that was currently operating and doing the thing. And Tim and the people that agreed with Tim, and that was the people that agreed with Sean, I was kind of thought that same thing, but Tim, the guy who was the figurehead and the primary owner on paper, I think technically, if we
would have had to have been the primary owner.
If we were going to go pro, they were everybody was an equal owner, I think, at that point, technically, but he would have had to sign on. And there's something that Matt says in this, which is that every owner or board member, or whatever you want to call them in this, and there was 8 board members plus Bill Nuttall, who was not an owner, but was a board member. None of them were the I'm going to lose $2 million a year rich owner.
Yeah.
Some of them had enough money to technically satisfy the United States Soccer Federation requirements for pro league standards, which is a whole nother thing that I don't want to get deep into. But nobody was going to sign on the line to lose that much money.
Now, I think I'm sorry for interrupting.
Sure, go.
I think it's important because the other thing that is out there a lot is that the CFC USL relationship and the fact that CFC did not go USL was purely a philosophical difference between, club versus franchise, pro rel, the purist, true believer. Sure. That CFC were purist, true believers out here, and we were just diametrically opposed to what USL was doing. That's a great story.
And it's a little piece of it.
Yeah, that's a wonderful story. It's a wonderful narrative. But these people were never going to... These people are smart enough to not base the future of this club on a philosophy of soccer.
You see where we are now.
So there was, and that's why I appreciate you saying multiple times that we wanted, that there were people, everybody wanted to go pro. We just had different ways of doing it, or different. And I think a lot of the difference was what they saw as sustainable. It was pragmatic more than philosophical. Now, sure, I think there's a strong undercurrent of independent soccer, of being a part of something that supports the clubs, that the league supports the clubs, not vice versa. And I do think that played a part. But I think more importantly, and because I think you're going to hear this over and over and over again through the story, is pragmatism. We did not see the USL at that time as sustainable.
It wasn't sustainable.
Yeah.
Teams were losing money hand over fist.
Right. And so I think it's important for folks to realize, because that's the other thing I hear about it all the time. Well, CFC just hated USL because they had this platonic vision of what American soccer is going to be. And if it didn't meet that, then just screw it. And that's a great narrative for us, the supporters, to buy into. But that's just not. That wasn't the reality in the boardroom. We
also didn't like them because of that. But I think very clearly we would have held our nose if the business model made sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And there's an argument that a lot of Detroit City supporters have made. And while I think that there's some interesting there's some interesting things within that story that we don't have to get into, but there is something about having a seat at the table, and there's something to that. And if you can't change, and we tried for a very long time before joining MLS Next Pro to change. We tried to do the independent thing. We tried to do whatever was the better thing for us and for American soccer. But at a certain point, you got to continue to exist, and having a seat at the table is better than no seat at all.
Yep.
So in this struggle, though, that happens, there's a clear divide. And I think when it comes to what's about to happen next, we see why one side of the argument, which ends up being predisposed to going the USL direction, and everyone else is not. And we'll see why that happens. But I think maybe folks didn't know that it was not a secret in the boardroom from the people that I've talked to that Sean thought we needed an investor to take us pro because no one was going to lose that amount of money. And we need an additional investor. And by the way, the board was open to that, to an additional investor existing. And so much so that they were going to putting together as part of talking to USL, talking to NASL, talking to, looking at NISA, trying to do MPSL Next Pro, doing all of these things, not Next Pro, MPSL Pro. As part of doing all of these things, and MLS Next Pro didn't exist at the time, they were putting together a pitch deck. They would take outside investment. We eventually did take outside investment from fans and from private outside investment. Think about the Lamppost Group. Think about Davis buying in. There wasn't this close, we're only going to do it on our own. We're going to do it whatever works best for us. And taking outside investment was not off the table. It just, spoiler alert, was not going to be from Bob Martino.
Yeah. So let's go back. Let's jump back slightly to remember to remember 2017, which we've already covered. That's the season where we had fewer home games than we had in previous years. Home games are revenue, at least for, us. Not everybody out there, but home games are revenue for us. And we had fewer of them than we had, in the previous 3 years. So what it ended up happening is that the financials were all mucked up. The club, which had been able to run sustainably, break even since its founding, since its existence, no longer was the case. This is the story of American soccer. How things can turn on just one rough year.
Also, we didn't initially have a full-time employee, right? But by the time you get to 2017, we have Sean McDaniel, who's acting as GM, who's a full-time employee. We have, I think, Reed Farnsley at the time, who's the secondary full-time employee. Yeah. When I first got really involved in 2014, 2015, Reed Farnsley came on, I think, in 2014 or 2015 as the first full-time employee. Mm-hmm. So there's something that I was debating on whether to share this because I thought it was a secret, and then reading through the articles, like it's in the articles, so it's definitely not a secret. I just forgot. Sometimes it's hard to know what's what's real and what can be substantiated and what's like just hearsay or just what's been told to you in confidence. But like Sean, they at a certain point during 2018, after 2017, right? They tell Sean McDaniel, 2017 to 2018, they tell him he's going to have to get another job.
It's at the beginning of the summer of 2018.
Okay. So after 2017, we end up losing money for the first time in a really long time, as Matt said. And it's in a Times Free Press article that at a certain point they tell Sean, hey man, and I don't know how, I'm sure this is not how the conversation went. It was probably, I would imagine, worse than this, but this is how it was relayed to me and how it's kind of said in the article. Hey man, we're going to have to re-examine the financials at the end of this season, but we're not making money. This is not sustainable. You're going to have to go back and get a regular job again. And then we'll figure out how to proceed after that. But you're going to become a regular board member again because we're not making enough money. And this is sometime in the early part of 2017, somewhere in there.
No,
2018, sorry.
Towards the beginning of the 2018 regular season.
Yes. And then 2018 happens after that. But I think it's interesting that is, again, it's a part of this story where we're at this turning point. Everyone's going, what is happening? What's going to happen? And I'll just jump ahead a little bit. I think in my mind, Sean's bet, which is the wrong one, and he doesn't get full. Part of this is me in this little period is me painting him as making a choice, and then obviously there's some choices later that I cannot defend that he certainly helped make or was involved in or whatever else. But he makes a choice to back the wrong horse, where he believes that the way that we're going to get to is that we need to go to USL, that Bob Martino is the answer, and that when Bob Martino comes knocking, Sean's like, this is my chance.
But I do think it's fair. I think it's fair to say that there's a lot about Sean's outlook at that time that was right. I mean, in terms of, what the club needed to do, how it needed to do it, there's a lot that Sean got right.
So there's a thing that Sean McDaniel and Bill Nuttall in combination said to me at the time, which is we need an investor to come in and buy out all the shareholders. This is the founders. Give them all a slap on the ass, high five, thank them, let them have seats at midfield, and then take us to the next level.
Yeah,
and it's got to be somebody that's a lot different. And they were 110% right about that. They were just in the end wrong about the guy it was going to be. Spoiler alert: it was Davis. It was not Bob. Bob was the wrong guy. Now,
and I'm sure I'll say this multiple times. It was just impatience.
It was impatience from USL, and it was arrogance from USL.
Yeah, it's impatience and arrogance on the part of USL that set a lot of this in motion.
And here's, I think, an important reason behind it. I think USL saw because think about some of the teams that were involved in the in what NPSL Pro could have been. You had us. Mm-hmm. You had Detroit. Mm-hmm. You had the Cosmos. You had Miami. I think in the initial Founders Cup, I think Cal United and Oakland are involved. Like you had some real interesting. I think Miami United was involved. You had some really interesting teams, and you had what could have been an insanely good core that would have suddenly propped up after you just beat the NASL. You just put the NASL out of business. There is no more competition. MLS has 2 teams in your league. You are still getting from Cincinnati, from Nashville. You're still getting the upward mobility check written to you.
Yep.
Life is friggin' good, right? Like you are in a good position. And now there's this other thing that comes up. And I know this for a fact that Bob Martino reached out to USL because he was interested in owning a soccer team.
Somewhere.
He wanted to do a soccer team in a real estate development.
I mean,
he reaches out to USL.
He talked about
and USL says, "Great, we love it. We have just the place for you."
And he says something not quite that explicit, though we've been told that by people connected to him. But like he talks about looking into owning hockey teams and soccer teams in California and other places. He was agnostic on where he was going to go.
Right, yeah.
So there's something that you wrote in this that I think that this is the time that Papadakis has to make his move. He feels like he has to make his move on Chattanooga, and that's a supposition on our part, right? But like reading the tea leaves. And so he finally makes good, the USL makes good on their threat to come and take our market from us. We're not coming. Cool. We'll take it from you. And
I will remind you that in the year prior, or maybe 2 years prior, like they steered a franchise into Nashville. They steered a franchise into Birmingham. They steered a franchise into Memphis. All 3 of those, and these are all like our conference mates in the NPSL back then. All 3 of those move in, say, franchise is being bought. This is happening. Like, are you in? And all 3 of those places are in because,
and largely they take the fan group.
They took the fans. They took, in some cases, the folks that were running the operation in the first place. Like it was a seamless acquisition,
at least from the outside.
From the outside.
Yeah.
And so if I'm USL and I need to make my move, I found a rich guy who's willing to buy into this idea.
And if you listen to people around USL, they'll tell you he's one of, if not the richest owner in USL League One still. So like they found a guy with deep pockets is my point. Like they found a guy who doesn't really care where he's going to be or is at least able to be sold on Chattanooga and that should have the pockets to make whatever happen, whatever that looks like.
And so that is how Martino comes to acquire franchise rights.
And I think, again, I'll say this again. It's what's so interesting in going back and looking at this now in hindsight, so much of that makes so much sense. Like they know they have a club that is interested in going pro, that has been incredibly successful in their own market, building connections. They know that there is that they know that they have, and they know that the club itself thinks that there needs to be an external investor. There's so much that makes sense from a USL perspective, except for one thing: they never got who we were.
They never got it.
They just don't. I mean, they felt like, and actually, I mean, you're right. The other dominoes fell in the old MPSL Southeast Conference, and it makes sense from somebody who's sitting in Alpharetta, Georgia, or Tampa. That, well, I mean, Chattanooga is just the same thing. We'll just do the same thing, and the same thing's going to happen.
It's because these people are not soccer people. These people are not community people.
Yeah.
These are just business dudes trying to sell franchises, trying to do the thing that's worked before. And it's why they are the wrong people
right
to be involved in soccer in this country, which is something that keeps coming up over and over again.
And so all of that stuff, I think I can look back and say, I can kind of say, okay, I get where you're going. I get it. I can forgive everything up until the point when they meet a little bit of resistance, which is we're ready to do this, but we're not going to do this with this person.
And so
all of a sudden, if they flip a switch to, well, we're just going to kill you.
So what I do think, I want to piggyback on what you said about they don't get it.
They get their fifis hurt.
They don't get what they never got about us and what they should have realized and what nobody on some level gets about us, and a little arrogance coming out on my part, is that why do 18,227 people show up at a game? I know it's a one-time thing, but why do per capita more people show up at CFC games than essentially anywhere else as far as city population? There's something here you can't quantify. And if you're not from here or living here, it's really tough to understand. But what they should have done, in hindsight, very clearly, is continue to court us the way they courted Detroit City and the way they courted Miami and the way they courted everyone else. Because if they would have got us to say, if they would have brought Bob, and this is totally supposition on my part, but if they bring Bob Martino to us instead of taking Bob Martino, selling him the franchise rights, and then doing a hostile coup d'etat takeover, if they come to us and say, hey, we got this guy. He really wants to own a soccer team. We think he'd be a good fit with you guys. We want to make an introduction, and then if it works out, we want to potentially bring you guys in. I'm not saying it works out, but there's a chance it does. But what they weren't willing to do, the arrogance of USL, at least from my perspective, is that they looked in and went, well, screw you guys. You're not going to come in. We will take your market. The thing they said out loud in some way, shape, or form, we'll just take your market if you don't join. And they tried to go through the process, and they didn't have the patience to wait for us.
I would love to know how much time, if any, they spent looking around in market for an investor, like someone in Chattanooga, because Davis was here. I mean, he may have not been.
He was in section 108.
Yeah, so
you say they like CFC or USL?
No, USL. Like they
didn't look.
I know. That's I guess. And that's the big why. Chattanooga's a big enough town,
but also
because it's not worth putting that much effort into if you can just direct somebody that calls.
Something solves in your life.
Also, it goes back to Matthew's saying USL is in the business of selling franchises.
Sure.
And you know what they did before trying to kill us?
They sold a franchise.
Sure.
So they got that check. They didn't care about us. And they don't care about us. And no league cares about you. If you're listening to this and looking to this, no one cares about you.
If you are a fan of a USL team, you need to understand that the lip service you're getting about Division 1, promotion, relegation, all of those things is well and truly great. And I am sure there are extremely good people in Tampa that work for USL.
We know of one.
And we know of one of them personally. They're extremely good, capable people who want to make soccer, American soccer, a better place.
And by the way,
and they're trying to do that. But there is one person who owns the whole darn thing who will sell you out in a heartbeat. In a heartbeat.
Allegedly. Matt trying to get us sued.
He will sell you out one day. It's because it was always the plan. He bought the thing, he was going to build the thing, and he's going to sell the thing. And you are going to be lucky if it comes with a good merger terms with MLS.
I'm just glad that all of this stuff is coming out of Matt's mouth, because I think if you spend any time on Twitter, you think this stuff is going to come out of my mouth.
Yeah, that's actually very fun, very true.
Let me go one step further with that, because I think it's really important. We've talked a little bit about the ND11 situation.
You need to contact legal counsel before you go any
Matthew, I need you to not make me make edits to this podcast, please. We're trying not to get.
We've talked a little bit about the ND11 situation. Everyone remembers what happened in San Diego Loyal.
Yep.
They're going to sell franchises everywhere they possibly can, and they do not care what happens to those franchises after the merger. Please understand that. They do not care. That is a problem for somebody else to figure out. That will have lasting ramifications in American soccer whenever this thing does go down.
Now, again, when you say they, you're talking New Rock.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sell the franchises now, and once it's time to put the whole thing together, they're going to be on a boat in the Caribbean, and they're not going to be caring at all what happens to Sporting Jacksonville, or what happens to East Ridge, or what happens to
Well, Eastridge won't be here.
the next one that comes along. That's the reality, and that's the sad reality. Is that the business makers in American soccer are just in it for themselves, and they're not actually in it for the communities. And we're a great example of that. Let's keep moving.
On Friday, July 27, 2018, Nipun Chopra, then a soccer journalist writing for Sock Takes, shout out Nipun. I hope somehow you hear this. I don't think you care about soccer anymore, but you were a good dude, and I appreciate you, man. Broke a story that tells of the USL awarding an expansion franchise in its still unnamed D3 league, which was to begin play in 2019, and that CFC general manager Sean McDaniel and former U.S. soccer general manager and then CFC board member Bill Nuttall had resigned from the club earlier in the week. Sean was joining the new USL expansion side as GM, and he would be announced a few weeks later as GM and president. What were you guys feeling, and where were you when you heard this news? Because what I remember for me is that I was absolutely gobsmacked, blindsided, no idea this was coming.
Oh yeah, I had zero. I had no idea. I mean, and like I said, at that time, I had little understanding of what it actually might have meant. And other than I know when boards split and things like that, that's an existential crisis for an organization. I mean, I knew that much immediately. But I really did not know. I had nothing. It was just out of the blue, and from that moment on that's when the radicolation. Radicalization. Yeah.
Radicalization.
Yeah, radicalization.
I was trying to make a red pun, but I can't do it.
So yeah, it was. It hit me like I don't remember. It's not one of those things where I know where I was when I read it, but
I know exactly where I was.
But I remember quickly reading. I went on and read. I went and read everything because there were articles after the announcement was made. There were articles all over soccer media all over the country.
Your 2018 folder is like so many articles. Yeah.
I need you to hit pause, if you don't mind.
Sure.
A few moments later.
And we are back. Matthew, tell me where you were.
I was the week leading up to Friday, July 27, and the news breaking. I was in Montana. I was at a work conference, and my flights.
Hey, I was too, but not at a work conference.
Oh yeah.
I was at a wedding.
And those, I was flying back that Friday, and I think my connection in Denver was delayed. And so I didn't get into Nashville until much later than anticipated. And I think Nipun's article drops at 4 p.m.
Yeah.
I would believe you.
If I clicked on it, I bet I could find out. Somewhere around then. It's late afternoon. And I think I was in the car because my phone starts blowing up. And the group texts and all the things are just going bananas. And I'm in the car. I'm on the way back to town, and I remember hearing about all this, and Breezy, you mentioned it earlier. Like, we knew that there were some factions. There were two factions on the board. What we didn't really know was who else belonged to each one. And I remember in those hours after that evening after, I remember you and I specifically, along with some others, like having a pretty clear sense of what was going on. That because we had seen this movie before in other places. We knew that this was a takeover attempt. We knew, and I think I labeled it at the time, this was a coup d'etat. And it was less that night. It was less about, CFC fighting the coming of the beast and more who has the votes. Mm-hmm. If this thing goes down to, an offer or a, or whatever, because like everyone got offered eventually. Like if this comes down to it, like who has the votes? And like a lot of y'all out there know, like I'm a lobbyist, although I was on a 2-year sabbatical at the time. But like, I know how to count votes. And what was interesting is, trying to decide like, okay, well, we know that Tim's going to fight this thing. We also know that Sean...
He was saying it out loud at the time.
We also know that Sean resigned. So you had 7...
And Bill, who
Right.
was no longer at a voting interest since he resigned, but like was definitely resigning for a reason, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So like there were 7 people left. We knew that one of them was a no. And it all came down to like, were there 4 votes for this thing? That was where I was on night 1. But like it was
And night 2 and night 3.
Unambiguously clear that this was a coup d'etat. This was USL's chance to take the Chattanooga market. And it was our choice whether we just accepted their terms or died.
Let's talk a little bit more about the coup d'etat and what they did to then start to try to strong arm us into. So the lay of the land around that time, we've already spoke about, and we don't need to go over where the boardroom was, where the fan base was, about the pro movement, right, and the leagues we were talking to. Additionally, CFC was going into a September expiring, and this was in August, a September expiring lease at Finley Stadium. Mm-hmm. You cannot convince me, and I do not have proof of this, but you cannot convince me that they didn't know this.
Oh, 100%. I know they know it.
I don't mean at the time. I mean going into this.
Yeah.
CFC's lease was expiring. In one of the paper articles I read from your folder, another shout out to your folder, they admitted, CFC admitted to owing Finley Stadium, which the money was also paid later, it says in the article, but like they still owed a balance because they hadn't finished out their season and paid their balance yet. So Finley was on the ropes. Also, something that we'll get into some more, a little bit more nefarious things that happened with Finley Stadium here in a second. But Finley Stadium and CFC and the Chattahooligans and UTC, there's a UTC article that comes out not long after this about UTC saying, we think we're going to probably leave Finley Stadium potentially in the next few years and move to and you were working for UTC at the time, so I don't know what the tenor was within UTC, but like UTC was making overtures in the paper, like, we're going to leave Finley Stadium and go back on campus. We don't like how things are run. We don't like how things are going. Tim Kelly was on the board and complaining out loud about how like difficult the thing was. They had just transitioned from Paul Smith, who at one point, to Chris Thomas. Then after that, there was this crazy time of Finley Stadium. And so the Red Wolves come in, and we don't know if it's the Red Wolves directly, which are called Chattanooga Pro Soccer at that time. We don't know if it's Chattanooga Pro Soccer that come in. We don't know if it is some of the most nefarious suggestions here that are rumors, or that Sean McDaniel and Bill Nuttall are doing this. I don't know that that's the case.
We do know that USL, people working for USL were working on a Finley Stadium plan for what Chattanooga Pro Soccer would look like in Finley Stadium. Mm-hmm. In fact, we know that was going on in July, before the SocTex article, before the official announcement. We know that they were starting to look at how do you move the camera on the other side of the field.
Yeah.
And we know
this was all going on like even around the time that CFC was finishing the NPSL season and had those 2 playoff games. Right around then, July 12 and July 14. We know this was going on then. We don't know the level of involvement that people that were currently working for CFC at the time, Bill and Sean, had in that respect. But something was clearly going on behind the scenes.
Yes, and additionally, there were vendors that were being told us, like, one of which I may or may not have used to work for, like, we're preparing for a professional soccer at this stadium. CFC was not openly going pro. They were openly courting, but they were not openly going pro, and certainly not the next year. We're going to be moving to pro soccer. We need to figure out how to do this. We need to figure out how to do that. We need quotes on this. We need quotes on that. This due diligence was happening, and here is my supposition, and it is simply a supposition, but it is backed up by a lot of smoke, and there is, where I believe there's fire. USL had negotiated, or somebody involved with USL had negotiated, in my mind, a verbal deal, and nothing was signed very clearly because it doesn't end up happening, with Finley Stadium to become, and it is in the articles that I was reading, like, they're negotiating, and CFC is worried about, everybody's worried about, UTC is worried about there being a second professional, or a first professional, a second tenant behind UTC, a professional soccer team there, and that is going to then push CFC out. Or if not push CFC out, if folks may remember at the time, Chris Thomas, who was running the stadium, refused to do multiple events in the same weekend. So anytime there was, this Finley Stadium policy at the time was, if there was a soccer game on a Saturday night or Sunday night, whatever the night was, it was always Saturday, there could not be a UTC football game that same weekend, or vice versa. And UTC had first pick, CFC had second pick. So if the Red Wolves had been given, if Chattanooga Pro Soccer had been given a lease, which it is viewed by me and everyone else that at least they were in negotiations on some level.
And by the way, of course they were. Like the official expansion to USL announcement takes place at
Finley Stadium.
In Finley Stadium.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so they are taking away Finley from us, and that is one of the key pivotal moments where obviously the community pushes back really hard. Andy Burke pushes back very hard publicly, saying
that's the mayor.
That's the mayor at the time of Chattanooga. Yeah. They certainly must have pushed back hard behind the scenes, because something that Matt has said, and I don't remember if you said this on air or off air, Finley Stadium belongs to the municipalities of Hamilton County and Chattanooga when it comes to paying the bills. So obviously UTC helped build it. There was a joint venture, whatever else. But now
I think the UT Board of Trustees owns a stake as well in the Stadium Corp. That might have gone away by now.
No, I don't know that that's true. But I don't.
It might have gone. It might have gone away by this point in time.
Point being is, when Finley Stadium loses money, the county and the city have to pitch in at some point.
And by the way, it did
the downfall.
Basically every single year of its existence up until
2011.
Yeah. What happened then? What happened in 2011?
When a soccer team started playing there.
Well, we started playing there in 2009, but we really started paying for. I mean, Tim tells a story, I think, on one of the podcasts with us, where they essentially threw CFC the keys in the early days and were have fun. Right. Yeah. And then once it became something, they started really paying rent and paying a lot more and whatever else. It took Finley Stadium out of the red, at least in some respects. And in 2017, they made some money. Finley Stadium did, and they were really excited about it. And then coming into 2018, they have this opportunity, reading the tea leaves and reading all the rumors and whatever else, to get a professional soccer team that's going to play a lot more matches in there. And I would imagine from their point of view, they're like, cool.
It was an incredibly, the most charitable description for the Stadium Corporation Board and the executive director, who's a person. The most charitable description is that it was an incredibly good opportunity to have more events at Finley Stadium regularly, and to help Finley Stadium be the community asset that it was always supposed to be.
Yeah.
What they didn't realize for much of this process was that Bob Martino's plan in coming to Chattanooga was to use Finley Stadium for a year to kill CFC. If it came to that, he was
trying to be CFC.
Let's be very serious. He was trying to be CFC. But the plan was
who wouldn't want to be?
To use Finley Stadium to kill CFC, and then his plan all along was going to be a large soccer stadium and real estate development at Wheelan Foundry and US Pipe. Mm-hmm. The very site where the Lookouts new stadium is being built today. And it took an uncomfortably long amount of time for all of us that were fighting this whole thing to figure out that that was the actual plan. And once we did figure it out, and once...
More importantly, the Stadium Corp figured it out.
Once the Stadium Corporation learned of the plan, and one of the reasons they learned of the plan was because Chattanooga Pro Soccer was unwilling to sign a long-term lease. They just wanted a 1-year lease.
Honestly, if they sign a long-term lease there, CFC might be dead right now.
Oh, yeah.
They were so unwilling to negotiate or to like massage the situation. It was Bob's way or the highway. It really was. And once the Stadium Corporation learned that, oh yeah, they're not doing a long-term lease, like they just want a year because they want to kill this thing, use the stadium while they can, and go build elsewhere. That's when you see a lot of the kind of neutral folks on the periphery, but like community leaders, political leaders, really start to get involved quietly. Because if Finley Stadium went back in the red, it all of a sudden became a municipality's problem. And once Finley Stadium went into the black in 2011 or 2012, whenever the books closed, it was given a very specific mandate. Never lose money again. And thus, here we are. Now, you might be asking yourself, well, why are they in East Ridge? Because political leadership made it difficult. Number one, Chattanooga is fundamentally a town that is not transactional in nature. It is a town for people. It is a town for community. It's a town with friends. And
it's a pretty protectionist town.
It's very, very close knit
of each other.
They do not. We do not take well to outsiders. We do not take well to people who think because they have money they can do whatever they want. And so, friends of CFC in this town locked down every single bit of developable land within the city limits. The price was too high, or there was no price, but there was no building. The only spot that we effectively could not control was perimeter properties. It was the Foundry site. And that was a bit of like taking a chance, because like that's the one spot since it sat empty in 2000. The Foundries stopped in
2003 and 2006, according to what you wrote down here.
Okay. So like by 2006, nothing was going on there. So at this point, it had been 12 years of the can being kicked down the road. What's going to happen here next? And one of the central things that always stopped development from taking place at the site was that every single developer that ever came in that wanted to do a private development wanted the city of Chattanooga to fork over a bunch of money to help clean it up. Because it was probably like a brownfield or whatever it's called. Like it needed some serious cleanup. That is ultimately what stopped any development happening there. The city was simply not willing to give money to a developer to then cause their own financial problem later.
Meaning, let me lay that out directly. If CFC then goes out of business or stops playing at Finley Stadium goes in the red and becomes a municipality's problem. So Matt is making the connection there that like one of the big reasons that Chattanooga City was not, when Tim Kelly was not the mayor at the time, like one of the big reasons they were not willing to give that money potentially and clean up that property. And Bob Martino was definitely not willing to come out of pocket, as far as we can tell, the millions of dollars to clean it up or whatever it would have taken. And no developer was. And so he ends up, at the end of the day, pivoting to East Ridge. And that's when there's this wild narrative and public relations thing that starts. Because all of the... I'll read you something that's I think is interesting, and then I want to talk about some of the tenor of the all the communications. So the original in July 27, 2018 is what I have written down here for the date. It's a USL press release. This is Bob Martino. This is a fantastic opportunity and a watershed moment for soccer fans in Chattanooga, said Bob Martino.
It's probably August 1, but
this market has proven that it has the right ingredients to launch and sustain a professional franchise. We are excited to take this next step into USL Division 3 for fans and the community. I applaud the existing grassroots support and passionate fan base already in place in the city, and I welcome the opportunity for us to work together to realize the great vision for professional soccer in Chattanooga. Our goal is to build upon the remarkable soccer history that has been created here and establish a professional club of which both fans and our community can be proud, one that will make a lasting contribution to what makes this city great. I want to add a few things around this. When you read that, you cannot convince me that he doesn't think he's buying CFC. This is we're going to build on the legacy and we're going to do it as CFC, or we're going to absorb CFC and it's going to be a part of this.
That's a really well-written quote for the press release that gets written several weeks prior to the expansion announcement date.
Totally.
Because just before August 1st, which is the day the expansion announcement was official, he was turned down. His takeover attempt was rebuffed.
And let's go into that in a second. But I want to say this is a market different. So this is he doesn't mention Chattanooga FC by name, but he talks about the passionate supporters and this history and the soccer and whatever else, because he thinks he's going to come in, from my point of view, and be greeted as a liberator. And I'm sure USL told him, this market is going to be so excited for you. And I've been told by people that that's what they told him. This market is ready. It's ripe for soccer. They can't wait you're going to be greeted.
And you are the guy.
And so he comes into this market, and this is the messaging. The messaging on the outside from the outside to everyone is, we are happy, we are excited, and it pivot and to be a part of this, and we're going to do it together. Once then we'll talk about exactly what happens and getting turned down. And then it pivots as the pivot to Eastridge happens, because we've jumped ahead a little bit in the timeline. We're going to come back. As the pivot to Eastridge happens, the tenor of the articles and the outside communication becomes different. Then it becomes, kumbaya, we love everybody. Everybody can coexist. We're nice. We're not doing anything. We don't care what CFC does. They're welcome to remain in the amateur team.
Why are y'all being so
Why
mean?
are y'all being so mad? When behind the scenes, at every turn, every opportunity, in every place, USL, Chattanooga Pro Soccer, later the Red Wolves, and the Red Wolves, whether it's from the academy, anywhere they are, the foundation, all this stuff, they attempt to buy, steal, coerce, or kill anything that can that can hurt CFC, that is involved with CFC, while continually saying, why are you guys so negative? Why are all the Chatta hooligans so mad at us? We're just trying to do a soccer thing in East Ridge. And
it was a total lie.
And for those of you who weren't here and you look at I can understand on the outside, and maybe if you showed up to the Red Wolves in 2021 and you see how angry some of us are and how upset some of us are about this, you may not understand why we are. But we saw the duplicitous nature of the communications. We saw the duplicitous, just the lies, the two-facedness of all of this. They were never here to be friends. They were never here to just do a fun thing in soccer in East Ridge. That was a pivot that happened when it didn't work out. But this is not a story of some guy who wanted to do soccer, picked out Chattanooga, and Chattanooga FC wasn't a factor. It was take over CFC. If you can't, kill them, and then you'll have essentially taken them over. And it's just really interesting going back and reading these quotes and reading these things. Let's talk a little bit about, and I know, Matt, you have to get out of here in a little while, so we got to keep moving through this.
We're doing okay.
Let's talk about how the offer comes in, and because one of the big pivotal. Then we've jumped ahead on the Finley timeline to kind of explain the whole Finley timeline, because CFC goes on to sign a 3-year lease. Bob has pivoted to East Ridge. And I think Andy Burke actually makes us aware, at least me publicly, by saying something at the
supporter raise in January 2019. Andy Burke lets the cat out of the bag that he won't be in the city limits, and in fact he'll be in East Ridge. That announcement does not become public and official on their side of the press release until April.
So to tell Sean's side of the story here for a second, and what he would say essentially is, he gets a call that an investor is coming to town, that an investor is going to bring USL here, that it's a done deal, and that he's either getting an offer or going to get an offer, whatever else. So he resigns from the board. That's the thing that gets reported. He then obviously gets hired on, and it's an offer he can't refuse. And that's what he tells everybody, including me. He tells, it's an offer I can't refuse. And so we're counting the votes, And the offer that comes in, and this is
This is maybe the most critical part outside of the Stadium Corporation Board learning that Bob is planning a real estate venture and that the soccer experience at Fenway Stadium would be short-lived. This is possibly the most important thing in this entire story that prevents or that keeps CFC alive.
or they keep CFC as CFC that we know today.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
there's obviously maybe a parallel universe where they do take a buyout and CFC becomes owned by Bob Martino. But it doesn't. And here's why it doesn't. And this is a thing we talked a lot on this podcast. There's a ton. If you go out and read Reddit and Twitter, there's a ton of salacious things you can find out there, some of which may be true. But there's a lot of stuff we tried to really do our best to corroborate everything and make sure it's the truth. We can tell you the exact amount of money that was offered by Bob Martino.
$200,000. That is what he offered CFC. And that is the reason that he doesn't own CFC.
So when counting the votes,
Let me go one step further, because USL had told him to not offer anything. That it was just take it over.
Allegedly.
Just turn it over to him. He was convinced he was going to have to offer something, and they came up with a number. And that number was $200,000, which was,
roughly double
yeah, whatever.
what one of the other franchises was offered, NPSL franchises was offered.
I need that is a disgustingly low number for 10 years of blood, sweat, tears, efforts. You're buying a fan base. You're buying a stadium, at least temporarily. You're buying
Access to those things.
so much goodwill in the community. You're buying so much. You're buying a partnership with the foundation. $200,000 was one of the most insulting things that could have ever possibly happened. Even maybe more than offering $0.
Yeah.
And that offer, which was communicated in written format ahead of a meeting, which was ahead of the expansion announcement, but after the July 27 article in Sock Takes.
Full out blitz. Taking the stadium, taking your general manager, taking people. I mean, it's just...
Now, was there only one offer? I've heard that he came back.
Let's talk about that.
Okay.
It was a written offer communicated $200,000. They go to sit down ahead of the announcement because CFC is still supposed to be part of that announcement on August 1st.
You're not talking about the USL's announcement. Yeah.
well, CFC is supposed to be part because USL wants us.
Right. Yeah.
And the offer was so insulting, but the threat of extinction was also so real that a couple members of the board were charged with, take the meeting, figure out if there's something we can do there. And they essentially counteroffered, why don't you invest it in the club and let's work together, let's do this thing together.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Let's we don't want that. We're trying to do this thing sustainably. Yes, we've needed an investor for a while. Can we work this thing together?
And also, as part of that meeting, it was, what are you about? Who are you?
Yes.
And it was a good faith, from the telling that I've been told by several different people. It was a good faith effort on our part, and maybe on his part. I'm not saying it wasn't, but to have a conversation to find out, hey, this is happening. Can we just work together but still be CFC? Can you become our primary owner, our PTO? Can you become a part of the group, but not the only part of the group? And can we, we don't have to do this two teams thing. We're definitely not accepting your offer. But when counting the votes, a thing that Matthew and I didn't find out till a little while later when we found out what the offer was, is that even the most diehard, it's time for us to move on, I don't want to put any money into this board member, every single one of them was like, what this cannot be real. This is so, everyone was insulted. That turned any chance he had of having the votes back. It's the pivotal moment in all of it. Because if
there was, I think we came up with at the end of the day that the votes would probably go down to like 4-3, maybe 5-2. Like maybe, and I don't know which way, by the way, on either one of those, but like there was some swing votes like that were potential there, and a good offer and a good get to know you meeting could very well have been CFC becomes like the Chattanooga Pro Soccer CFC, like merge. The thing actually happens, but the initial offer was so insulting, and something very critically here. That meeting made the vote count 7-0.
Yeah.
He screwed himself in that meeting. And I don't know if he even knows that today.
Yeah, back when I said, I think one of the things that it was obvious is that he and USL just did not get Chattanooga. From what I've heard about that meeting is that's one of the times when the CFC side realized he didn't know what we were about. Like he didn't know that we're not just about what's on the pitch. Like we're about so much more than that. And he just did not. He gave the impression he didn't care about the other stuff. Now, if that was a mistake if that wasn't real on his part, okay, but he gave the impression that whatever, the foundation, that's nice, whatever
This is I'm going to allege here because there's a paraphrase quote that I'm not sure is exact, but it was something to the effect of like foundation, charitable works, things like that are PR problems.
Yeah, something to that effect. I mean, and that's
as opposed to actually doing the work every single day and trying to make Chattanooga a better place.
Yeah, and I think I'm not going to put words into any founder's mouth, but my gut from meeting some of them and speaking with them, to some of them the foundation's more important than what happens on the pitch.
There's a reason the mission statement is what it is.
Yeah. And so the idea that, okay, you throw us pennies and then you come in and insult the heart of what we are. What did he think was going to happen?
To sum it up, it became very, very clear in that meeting that this man may be buying a soccer team for the Chattanooga area, but this man did not understand Chattanooga whatsoever.
Correct. Yeah.
And would never understand Chattanooga whatsoever. Yeah. And I think we've seen in the 6.5 years that have followed that those folks' belief that he didn't get it and never would have played out extraordinarily well.
Yeah.
And then it turned out like there was the whole business side, right, which I guess we'll get into as well, that also has not turned out. Like the business side should have been the thing that he got right. And that's possibly the worst disaster out there.
Bob's Vaporware.
This is also like how the narrative that he's poor comes from.
Which is because he hasn't finished the project. I don't think he's poor, by the way. Let me read to you because I think it matters. You and I, we always sum it up as make Chattanooga better through soccer. But if we read what's currently on the website, which is the same or very similar to what it's always been, our purpose, Chattanooga Football Club's purpose is to build community through the world's game. It's always been about community. That's my part. Our mission is to use soccer as a tool to build strong relationships across age, race, creed, and socioeconomic status for the greater good of our city. Our vision, this is the part I think has been updated as we've grown. Worldwide, soccer builds community, shapes culture, develops talents, and unites diverse peoples. Chattanooga Football Club is helping the same happen right here in Chattanooga, creating true opportunity for all players and great entertainment for all fans. Chattanooga FC does this through its premier men and women's team, through its youth training programs of the Chattanooga FC camps and select teams of the Chattanooga FC Academy, CFL adult leagues, and through Chattanooga FC Foundation as charitable programs, CSM, and Operation Get Active. Notice this is not just about we have a professional men's team.
Right.
Like it is just fundamentally different. And I think I said something at the Summit for Soccer in America or whatever it was, and in 2018, sorry, to owners. I was really lucky to give I spoke about why and how like fans and supporters and clubs could have supporters, and what I urged that room full of potential soccer owners or owners of soccer teams to do was to build something worth building your life around. Because people will partner with you as unpaid employees in the way that we have done many times. If you build something worth building your life around, it's really tough to build something that's worth, like Chattanooga Football Club and the community that surrounds Chattanooga Football Club, whether it's the Chattanooga or the greater Chattanooga FC community, is the people that, like, my parents would have built their life around the church, like social life. The people that would take care of my wife if I got hit by a bus is that community. Like, that's the community that we build our entire social life around, and we build our life around. There is so much around that community that goes so much further than soccer. Soccer happens to be the thing that brings us together, but it's about so much more than that, and it's so much deeper than that. And it's about adding to a community, not taking out of it. And I don't think, again, from my perspective and from the perspective of the founders that we've talked to, Bob Martino got that. And I don't think people outside of Chattanooga, it's one thing to say it and it's another thing to feel it. You can read what I just read and you can read it, but you have to know that. And I think we all know it, and it's why we fought so hard to the club that Chattanooga built, right? That was your slogan.
No, that wasn't me.
Well, it was a slogan that I attribute to you.
That was the podcast that Chattanooga built.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that's true.
The
That's true. That's
podcast
true.
that CFC built, which was on Galen. Was it Galen that said that CFC is the club that Chattanooga built?
It was very likely like his adminship of the Twitter handle, the Chattahoogan Twitter handle back then.
Yeah.
But my point in all of that is, like,
so sorry, Gail. I completely stole that from you for my podcast.
it was great, and it is great. And I think we just there's a piece there that's really hard to explain to folks on the outside, but it's one of the reasons I think that an outsider was not able to come in, and no outsider has been able to come in and kill CFC. And it took us a while, but we eventually found Davis, who was one of us, who has been able to do the thing that we needed to take us to the next level professionally and to give us a financial runway and all these other things. But it wasn't ever going to be somebody from the outside.
I want to talk about a couple of things that happened during the fall of 2018. And this is in no timeline chronological order. This is just going to be the stuff that I remember off the top of my head. We've said several times now that the plan was to become CFC, and upon failing to take what CFC had for themselves or kill it. In November of 2018, they recruit Gretchen Hamill, who was the CFC women's general manager, over to their side. She was promised things, and I don't feel comfortable enough talking about like specifics, so I'm not going to. But she was promised things like that, what it would be like for her over there. Offers were made to acquire in some shape or fashion Chattanooga Sports Ministries, Operation Get Active, and eventually the Academy. Although that is more of a kind of youth associations that were partnered together under the CFC brand, more or less just like splitting off.
And just a shameless plug, if you want to go hear about the history of kind of how CFC Academy came out of kind of the confederation of various community soccer clubs, you can go back. There's a previous episode with Mark Harrison, who was at the time, I think, maybe the president of CFCA, I think.
I will put that in the show notes.
Yeah, and so you can hear that a little bit about how the Academy came about, and really how it. I think we get into a little bit of the story of CFCA versus kind of the East Ridge Academy, not East the USL Teams Academy.
It was also the subject of rumor at the time that fall that upon Operation Get Active, which again
Arm of the foundation,
And that's a program
after school program
yeah.
plus a hot meal. It's like twice a week.
right?
It serves
in Title I schools.
yeah
in
it
Hamilton and
serves
Bradley County.
over 1,000, maybe 1,500 by now students each semester. It was a rumor at the time that upon failing to pick off OGA, that there were efforts trying to get its position inside of Hamilton County schools to be no longer inside.
Yep.
Which, if true, is one of the most damning things that I have ever heard. Because like soccer is one thing, professional soccer is one thing, but messing with kids, messing with like legitimate, good, charitable work, is beyond the pale, and it further underscores how much of the wrong person that USL had steered to come here, and further underscores that CFC was correct in deciding that this was not the person for CFC going forward.
Yeah, I just continue to hope that wasn't true. Like, really hope that wasn't true. And then, like, we obviously don't have proof on that, but that was a very strong rumor circulated through.
Yeah, I mean,
we all heard that.
We have all heard that independently.
yeah.
So,
Yeah, big allegedly on that one, but big allegedly on that one.
I remember also that fall there was the introductory press conference from Tim Hankinson, which he was.
I should have queued this up so I could play it.
I think he meant well. I know people that knew him before his passing, and from all accounts, he was a decent guy, and he was making an honest attempt to try to connect with folks. And because I didn't know this at the time in September when he was announced, but like he had a major gaffe that stepped all over his initial press conference, shouting out the Chattahooligans.
Do you think it was a gaffe? Do you think it was a gaffe?
Well, so like I thought it was a gaffe at the time.
I did too.
Everyone did. But the more I heard later in years from people that played there in that initial stretch, and then the more that you heard from the academy world, and this really extended 2021, 2022 even. The consistent message, overwhelmingly consistent message from Red Wolves land, from USL world, was that CFC is going to die. There is no way that they can possibly fight this long term. I mean, at first it was, there's no way they can possibly fight this. And then it became, well, there's no way they can possibly fight this long term. By the time we got into NISA, it was, NISA is such a dumpster fire.
It's not actually professional.
It's not actually professional. It's not any of these things.
Might be the fairest thing they ever levied.
And it's like when NISA eventually like dies, because of course it's going to, CFC will be without a professional home. CFC will be without, like they are masquerading. They are fooling themselves. They will not be able to go further, and then it will be the end. A consistent message, and that message began in August of 2018. At all levels, they told sponsors this. They told academy parents this. They told anyone who will listen, and likely that included their own fans. And
the game is not something you said in this. The game is not about, and at the time especially, it was not about soccer, and is not about soccer.
It's about territory rights.
and
Yeah,
they had the
absolutely.
territory rights, and we had no professional league to go to.
And from where they sat, they were speaking truth. I mean, Nisa was the first 2 years of Nisa. I had faith until, well, I don't want to get into the moment of when I knew that the gig was up, but I mean, it's true. Nisa was not going to be there forever, and they were just going to wait us out.
That was the plan. By that point, that was the plan. But like in the early stages, they were making coaches, players, agents, everyone believe that like CFC is going to die. They're eventually going to sell out. Like this is just a short term, whatever. Like you're gonna, by the time the 2019 USL League, inaugural League One season happens, like it's gonna be CFC. Like this is just a short term thing. They'll move in. They'll take it over. Like you're going to be playing for CFC. They told multiple players that.
Yeah.
Players signed with the Red Wolves thinking they were signing really with CFC.
Now listen, they had they had. Are you telling me that what about the name? They had that naming contest.
I'm glad you asked.
I mean, it's clear that they didn't want to be CFC. They had that great marketing and all those great logos and all that stuff queued up to go.
By the way, I found the quote. I have to give a shout out to the Chattahooligans, so they know they are just as vital to this team's success as anyone else.
I'm going to tell you something. Tim Higginson was right. He was dead right. Not in the way that I guess he expected at the time.
So, yeah.
But he was right.
Yeah.
The naming thing was really interesting because it's been sworn to me that the name the Red Wolves actually won the naming contest.
Oh, really?
Like legitimately won.
Oh, okay.
It has been sworn
By somebody who has real knowledge of how it went down.
I do not believe them.
Yeah, I don't either.
I don't-
Park City already.
No, it didn't exist
No,
yet.
Park City came after.
Oh, okay.
It was one of 5 names. I think Sporting was one of them. Iron Horses was one of them. I forget the other 2. And what I can only say is that I'm guessing because it was not CFC, and at a certain point, like you just have to pick a name. Like you have to figure out something now.
And that was their thing for a while, was picking names via poll.
It was a hastily organized branding.
The Chattanooga Express was right there.
Yeah, actually, that's true.
And that could have absolutely
I think
killed
that
us.
was the name, right? I think that was one
Express
of the names.
was one of the options.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that was one of the options.
And that was like,
a hallmark back to the original USL team.
and they had
wasn't called that
who
then.
Sean McDaniel played for.
Who Billy Elliott played for.
yeah.
You call him Billy Elliott?
Bill Elliott played for. The branding exercise was incredibly hastily organized, and
Very clearly.
They spent minutes on that logo.
and it fit. It fit something that was like really fun and immediately made sense to us who were now like fully in the thick of the fog of war. That they picked a name, the Red Wolves, because like the only thing that ever made sense to me is like some branding intern got an assignment and was told, you have 5 seconds to figure this out. Went to Wikipedia, started scrolling,
Googled Arkansas State,
and they scrolling through like things to do in Chattanooga, and they came across reflection writing and the Red Wolf Conservatory, and they looked at it and said, number 1, red, not blue.
Yeah.
And they looked at it and said, oh yeah, that will resonate in Chattanooga.
Yes.
The most inauthentic way of coming to something.
I totally buy that as being what happened.
We have essentially been sworn off that it never happened like that, but you cannot convince me otherwise. And maybe it actually did win, but like, who was voting on this thing?
Yeah,
Like 4
family members.
four children in a trench coat? Like, and it was yet another like obviously inauthentic representation, only to show just how much they didn't get it.
Yeah.
And
Well, they've done so much good work for the Red Wolves conservatory.
Yeah, I think they made a couple donations that first year, or maybe that first couple months.
So we go to, we go to mid. I think it's mid-October at this point in time. The Stadium Corporation Board has been availed of their dreaming scenario. They essentially tell the Red Wolves to walk away. If you're not willing to sign a multi-year lease, like, absolutely not. And the Red Wolves pivot to CCS, which wasn't terribly surprising. Sean McDaniel was a Covenant graduate. The CCS president was a Covenant graduate. Jimmy Weekly, longtime CFC assistant coach for literally all of the first 10 years. And one of Sean's longtime best friends.
And avid supporter. There's some Facebook stuff. Like, he was an avid supporter of Sean when everyone was mad about Sean leaving. He was the one in the comments trying to be a good friend. I'm trying to be charitable. They're trying to be a good friend to his friend.
Jimmy at the time was also the high school boys coach at CCS. It was a natural place to go. Now, what I will tell you is behind the scenes at CCS.
How do you know this, Matthew?
Well, I'm an alum.
I needed that out there.
Behind the scenes at CCS, it was not well received at all. It was. I got to be careful how I phrase this, because there are a lot of Covenant College graduates that were extremely important in the foundation of CFC. But like, it was a classic Covenant Mafia situation at CCS.
He says I have to be careful about it, then says Covenant Mafia.
Right, yeah, right.
Like,
delicate use.
Jeez, Matthew.
Like, Covenant in a lot of ways is CCS grades 13 through 16. And like, it was just like, I'm serious. Like, people like in the administration felt like the headmaster, the president of the school or whatever, steamrolled them and just made it happen. And it rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. And it would be that way for the entire year. But that's kind of just my fun little CCS anecdote. But they go to CCS. They're also announcing at the same time they're going to play at CCS for a year. That they're going to build a real estate development. And that's kind of when all of the other stuff behind the scenes was already kicking off, because we already knew they were going to build a real estate development. USL, which was different from the USL, especially the teams that had told us not to join in the years prior, they were starting to switch how they were starting to switch their business model at the time to, you need a soccer stadium, you need a real estate development. Soccer's economics are terrible, and they will remain terrible. So build a stadium to hold soccer events, hold some concerts, hold some, high school football, hold some stuff. Do it at your stadium, but then pack your stadium and your land with other things. Mixed use development, the 5/1 concept, all kinds of stuff you can that will make you money, so that your little soccer interest no longer costs you money every year. The whole thing will make money. And if I look at this from a reasonable standpoint, like, this is one of the best things USL ever did to differentiate themselves. And it's one of the reasons why they are the league itself and some of its teams are in so much of a better position today than they were. But you need someone who knows what they're doing. We'll get to that.
So I don't know if this was in any of the documents. I'm just flipping through my folder, and I continue to be amazed at my mental illness.
My man.
Something else was announced in late October of 2018.
Oh, their first player.
And their first player. And I don't.
This was another move to win over CFC fans.
Mm-hmm.
And it worked in a lot of ways. It engendered a lot of goodwill from a lot of people. CFC is a community club, and people loved Greg Hartley. And when they signed him, friends of mine were like, hey, man, I'm going to support maybe not the whole Red Wolves thing, but like, I love Greg. The players are above. And while I do agree the players are above, something Matthew has said to me many times, and I agree with this, like Richard Dixon's time at CFC and as a Blue is not tainted by his time spent in Red. Like Jonathan Ricketts and Omar Hernandez, who were both CFC Academy players who eventually made their pro debuts in Red, are not tainted by that.
One of them who we'll see here in a week.
Yes. Like Summer Hernandez played for both teams. Nothing diminishes those. Like those players rise above the fray because those are jobs and those are people pursuing dreams. Who am I forgetting that went? I can see him. Brian Beeman went from us to them.
Oh, that's right.
Sebastian Capizzucci went from them to us.
Yeah, like this is like players do rise above the fray, but like this was a brilliant move by them, marketing especially. And he had been unable to come to CFC because of some immigration issues, which are none of my business to share publicly, but he was unable to anymore enter the country to play soccer, if not on a professional P1 visa. And so he could not enter in 2017 and 2018. So he was going to get a P1 visa.
This was his chance to finally come back to Chattanooga.
And this was like...
And this is one of the things where it hurts so... I think one of the keys here is that just how many broken promises there were over these last years, specifically from Martino and the red side of East Ridge. There's so many broken promises. We'll talk about the real estate development here in a minute, and the promises that were made to the women's team and all those types of things. There's a reason why everyone's has mostly and will eventually come back into blue. But like Greg was offered a chance at coming home, and it was offered disingenuously because they could not guarantee that they could solve his issues. And spoiler alert, Greg has still never been back. It was my belief is that they thought they could pull it off, but the marketing was worth it. And that's the sad reality of like using people. And Greg was not the only player. Like,
no,
there were other players over there that like Greg knew what was going on. Greg knew he was signing for them. It was his one shot. But like, other players thought that they were going to play for CFC.
I want to rewind 1 second. I think one thing...
And by the way, if you're out there in USL world and you're like, well, that's crazy. Like, players obviously know what's going on. Like, they're not going to... They can't be so stupid to know that they're not going to play for the Red Wolves and not CFC. I'll just remind you that Miami FC exists. We know there is documented evidence out there that a Miami... Before the Argentine Revolution, this most recent year at Miami FC, we know that there's a player who came from Italy who thought he was signing with Inter Miami that actually ended up signing with Miami FC. Some of us get so far into the weeds in these types of things that we forget that like players have a lot of other things going on. And agents have a lot of other things going on.
Don't forget Raul signing for the Cosmos, thinking he was signing into MLS.
Oh my God, yeah.
Remember that story?
This happens more often than you really want to know. And, I what are you going to do? Tell them otherwise? They may not sign.
How much did we talk about the supporter raise and what it did for the runway and the time it gave us to...
all we've talked about is Andy Burke at the press conference.
So in January of 2019, January 17 is what we have written down here. The founders and Andy Burke and the city of Chattanooga and everybody came together in this big event as the first club to offer real supporter ownership. And they offered that to do what CFC always does, is trailblazes, and offer real support. I mean, you can't see, they're off camera, but my shares are up there on the wall. Like, offer real, genuine ownership. And they sold, I think it was 8,000 shares. And here's what made the Martino, and I think we should have tied this in earlier, but I hope you're still listening, and you were listening earlier. And you might be thinking, like, $200,000 is a lot of money. Genuinely. Like, if someone offered me $200,000 for something.
If you're out there and you want to offer me $200,000, I will take it.
I would like to listen to what you would like me to do, because I'm interested. When CFC was offered that $200,000, they were rightly offended for what they had built, which Matt so eloquently put out there. They raised nearly $900,000 in the public offering from supporter shareholders.
That was to be 10% of the club.
Ended up being a little more than that, I think, actually, in the end.
Sure.
But $900,000 was raised at a valuation of like $3 million or whatever, as before that money was brought into the thing.
Let's dwell on that for just a second.
That's what I want to talk through, is like
$3 million in club valuation.
I don't have the figure in front of me, but it was something like that.
It was right pretty close to $3 million in club valuation in January of 2019, and in August, I guess it was technically July of 2018, 100% of the club's offering at $200,000.
By the way, it was $872,750 from 3,256 investors. I'm looking at the website right now.
Let's just understand, like, the difference there. Like, monumentally insulting does not cover it. It just doesn't. So you've got almost $900,000 in the public offering. There was more in the private offering. There was much more. I think it's public. Is it public about Lamppost?
The $200,000 is.
So you've got a public offering, or you get a private offering that, like, Lamppost contributes $200,000. We know from later on, and he's talked about this before, but like, this is when current team owner, primary team owner, and chair of the board, Davis Grizzard, comes to ownership in CFC.
By the way, I might have to bleep out the amount of money it was. I'm looking at to see if where it might have been public. Regardless, like, Lamppost invested
in the WeFunder.
It showed there.
Yeah, in the WeFunder, it had, because I remember that's the first time I was aware. I became aware. I remember Todd and I talking about this, I think early in one of the early episodes in the pod, on the 423 pod, that we were looking at the financials, and the total raise was well over $1 million for that. And I'm like, wait a minute, we only sold 800,000. What's going on here? And you look through, and Davis's amount of money is in the financial report. I think there were two.
So Lamppost is separate, and I'm pretty sure it's from those docs that I learned the amount of money.
Right.
So hopefully I don't get hit with why did you share that? But I'm pretty sure that those are public documents, and that's where I got that number.
You're right. I think that's where it was.
But it was $200,000, which was a lot of money for them to put in at the time. By the way, symbolically, the same amount of money that was offered for the club, they put in as an investment just into the club. It was. The market showed, not just our own, like, offended sentiments.
Yeah.
Like of
the market showed how valuable this was.
And by the way, Tim Kelly would tell me.
And the market showed how valuable this was in the face of extinction.
Yes. Tim Kelly would tell me years later, after Detroit City did their WeFunder, that he felt that we had been significantly undervalued at that point when we did our funder, our WeFunder, because we were the first ones. That's just a neither here nor there, but like the $200,000 was such a pivotal turning moment in that offer, and the public raise showed what people in Chattanooga and outside of thought of CFC, that wanted to see us in the face of extinction, as you said. And this money here wasn't what we're currently running on now, right? This money, though, gave us a runway to make the NISA, what ended up being the NISA leap eventually, to try to have a runway to figure out pro.
Yeah, because at that point in time, something had to happen to provide counter programming for as long as possible. And
we needed to go pro.
This is one of those things where I think there are some fans the like four of you across town that like felt offended that we would fight back.
Yeah, seriously.
But like, welcome to war. This is what happens. And once you make a commitment to fight, you're going to go all out. And the response, the backing from the soccer community instantly made other teams who we had worked with for years trying to do stuff. It galvanized everyone to get off the backbench and to get to work and to do something, to try to figure it out. Because if CFC went down, anyone could be next. And I will always remember like the absolute outpouring of support that we got. And straight up freaking help. Like Detroit City offered. It was their idea to play a match on the same night that the Red Wolves had their inaugural home game in USL. And it was their idea. Counter programming. And you saw the response. There were 3 sporting events in the city on that night. There was a Lookouts game, there was a CFC game, and there was a Red Wolves game at CCS. The Red Wolves game at CCS drew the least of them. The Lookouts game drew more. CFC drew the most. For an exhibition game. Now, yes, it was an incredibly meaningful exhibition game. There was a ton of weight and symbolism behind it. But it outdrew the first ever home pro soccer game in Chattanooga history. They got beat by an amateur club with a lot of goodwill and a lot of friends. And it was the sign of what was to come. I want to point out something, and I'm backtracking just slightly here. But we mentioned at the supporter raise that Andy Burke let the cat out of the bag about East Ridge. And he said, I'm paraphrasing, but he said something effectively that like they can bear this city's name, but they won't be in this city and they're not this city. And I thought that was really powerful then. It mostly got kind of ignored because of
Who said that?
I think it was the mayor.
Well, yeah, he said
There was something to that effect, and it mostly got ignored because we were talking about the supporter raise, and that was the big story. But like he wasn't wrong. Like they were going out to East Ridge, they were going out to just like do a real estate development, like play a little soccer. You know, we've got territory rights, but like whatever, it doesn't matter. And I would posit something. And I'm curious your guys' opinions about this. The closest the Red Wolves ever came to being a true Chattanooga team was when they lost the playoff final of the USL League One in 2021.
I hate you. That hurts.
Tell me I'm wrong. That's the closest they freaking came.
Oh, so much trauma.
I know. I hate him for being excited about this take.
So much trauma.
Let's talk about the academy.
Oh,
Okay. And then when we get to the development, I finally found one of the original articles that I've been looking for.
So,
And you might have to fill in some more on the academy stuff because I don't know that much. I know only bits and pieces compared to what I know about other stuff.
here's what I know. There were, when the CFC Academy formed back in like 2011, 2012, something like that, it was essentially like 5 different like soccer associations in town.
Yeah.
Middle Valley is one of them. East Ridge is one of them. I think Readout's one of them.
East Ridge came on later, but it was, Middle
Chattanooga
Valley.
United's probly one of them.
North River.
Yeah. So like there's all these all these kind of youth associations. They all end up uniting underneath the CFC brand. Like they've got their own like rec stuff going on, but like that's like really the genesis of the academy. Yeah. And I think that's important to know because it was not Like the academy had always been a very separate thing. Like CFC itself did not have control over the academy.
And something we've
really just lended the brand name.
It was almost like just a branding license agreement.
And something we've talked about over the past few months, and again, if it's your first time listening to this, just real quick, the academy for the first time as of last year has fully come under the Chattanooga FC first team. Like there's been some buyouts and some this and this and that and the other. And so like the academy was a very different thing at the time. Yeah. Unlike many teams, many professional teams, look at the team in Statesboro, Georgia, Tormenta, like many teams, St. Louis FC back in the day, developed professional teams on top of large academies, because academies in the pay-to-play model are what makes money. And whether you like that or not, that's how that works. So in taking... And they did take a large portion of the academy.
They took 80% of the coaches and 60% of the players.
Yep.
I think that ended up being 3 associations left, 2 stayed. But more coaches ended up leaving.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, think about this. These are people that they're coaching kids, but like their jobs as well. And if you're being told repeatedly they're going to die, what are you supposed to do? Like, do you be loyal and like maybe it all falls apart? Do you take?
Yeah, but look what they were again. You can say, go back. Look what they were promising. If you go back to those blueprints, they were promising like senior academy, like an academy locker room and
a transformation of Camp Jordan.
Yeah,
which would culminate
stadium.
in the stadium field. Or like the championship stadium field or whatever.
Which was different from the Eastridge Stadium that currently exists. They were supposed to build an additional stadium in Camp Jordan.
Well, there's
just
a small
to host.
stadium there. They were going to basically make the smaller or the stadium that exists. They were going to build it out.
They were going to make it a lot better, right?
Yeah.
Like
yeah.
Now, spoiler alert: this ended up being, this ended up being a massive broken promise. Yeah. None of that's happened. Absolutely none of that's happened. And you would see, starting as early as 2019, starting as early as 2021, nothing continued to happen over there. And behind the scenes, East Ridge, like the city, and the Red Wolves organization are not really friends anymore.
And if you think that might not be true, just go read Reddit right now, where it is like individual people talking about how much money allegedly that Bob has given each one of the city council people, and the like. It is remarkable the mess that is alleged to be going on over there. I say that because I'm not a resident of East Ridge and I don't have personal knowledge of the things, but it certainly looks like the city and Bob are having a very public fight about everything.
The tax projections in East Ridge for what was supposed to happen by now and what is happening by now,
I can tell you what they were.
Are dramatic.
There's $6 to $7 million in tax revenue each year projected for East Ridge.
Well, they're not doing that.
So we're talking about some of the academy stuff. Let's talk about, in addition to that, just right now, what they were supposed to build over there to supplement that academy. So when they announced, and this is a press release, right? But it's not a press release from them. It's written about the press release. $125 million investment, which we all remember was then revised up. But I'm going to stay on the $125 million.
It was revised to $200 million.
But it was $125 million initially supposed to be. I'm no mathematician and I'm not a real estate developer, but I think if you look at the stadium, it'd be hard to believe he spent 125 or anyone spent 125 million.
Well, let's zoom out for a second so we know what we're talking about, so we can go back in.
400 apartment and condominium units, 375 hotel rooms, 475,000 square feet of commercial space, including a stadium, walking and nature trails, and surrounding development that will create 1,200 jobs, not including construction and other businesses.
There is currently a half-built stadium and 4 townhomes.
Yep.
That went to market and did not sell. Yeah. I know this because for a stretch there, I was an avid scroller of Realtor.com. Specifically, the map feature, because, when I look for specific areas and whatever. And I noticed at one point in time being advertised as downtown Chattanooga is where I found it on the map. And I would click on Like, oh, that's interesting. A $400,000 town, like 3-story townhome, downtown Chattanooga. That's interesting. Click. To then in this description, it would mention that it was next to a soccer stadium in East Ridge. Which, and I'm no like real estate expert, but I assume that like sometimes you wanna advertise your thing in a little bit different area, and then it eventually draws people out. It's like, hey, have you ever considered like a little further out before? But I know they went to market.
It's called the bait and switch.
I know they went to market and did not sell.
Yeah.
I also want to read one little more piece of this. The stadium will also house staff offices, lockers, and multiple spaces for the team to meet, review film, and train. Multiple spaces. That would suggest other fields. But the entire development complements the team's training center, which is being built at Camp Jordan. A trail running under Interstate 75 will connect the two areas.
None of those things happened.
No.
None of those things have any intention of happening at this point in time. None of them.
Yep.
None of them.
Well, I mean,
This podcast that we're having is probably very different in like 2020, 2021, but it's 2025. Nothing has happened over there, and nothing is going to happen over there. Now.
So the a lot of broken promises on the obviously on the real estate development front, but the academy, when all of those families and a lot of what I learned as part of that process, which I didn't know, and it makes perfect sense, when an academy coach switches allegiances, which can happen in the cutthroat.
Absolutely.
Youth soccer is possibly more screwed up than like the pro soccer landscape.
Exactly. Generally, families and players go where the coaches go.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. And that's exactly what happened. I mean, my soccer family was ripped in half when that happened. All of the coaches my sons had in the academy, from U13 all the way up through U19, all of them left. And now my older son at that time was out of the academy. And then my younger son was what we talking about? We were talking about 20. Where are we now? 20.
Yeah, roughly
2019.
Yeah,
they announced their academy midway through 2019.
He was a junior. He was a junior in high school. So he had two more. He had that season and his senior season. Senior season, a thing called COVID took that away from him. But so he was in like on one of the last few years of the academy, and basically his whole team split, and there were some very loyal CFC families that stayed together and actually played rec soccer for half a year, and then came back to CFC because CFC had created an academy team. And yeah, it was tough. I mean, it was tough. My older son's favorite coach left and has since come back.
That's the thing. They all come back in the end.
Yeah. Most of
the
them
line.
have come back.
One of the things that we did not know at the time that we later started figuring out as people started coming back and we started hearing more stories about what was going on over there is that, and this was for fans, this was for players, this was for people that worked there, this was for all kinds of people. The more and the deeper experience you had in East Ridge, like the bigger the spring was out, the more you were repelled. And though CFC was decimated in the early days, the more time people spent actually in with the East Ridge project, the less they liked it.
Yeah, I think
the more people came back.
I think the stickiest stuff for East Ridge was the highest level because they were in ECNL, and they could say they had a team that was playing in a national league. Whereas the CFC Academy, if you wanted to play at that level, you had to go to one of our affiliates or a club that we were partnered with in Knoxville. So you had to go and play with a club in Knoxville if you wanted to do that within kind of the CFC Academy. That's probably the families and players that stayed the longest were because that they had those opportunities. And then when the USL Academy came about, they could still say, hey, we're offering a much higher level of academy soccer than CFC can offer. And that was in many ways true at the time. I think we've addressed that recently.
Like the Academy Wars beyond here in town, the Academy Wars have always been about like, oh, play at this high level. It's so much better. Like you'll get a college scholarship. None of that crap is like actually real. It's marketing. It's marketing for pay to play soccer. But like if you want to go down that road, well, their academy is in real trouble now.
Yes.
And let's like just be frank about it. Like their academy is facing a war now on two different fronts. They no longer have the highest level of boys soccer. Like that's going to be MLS next. The elite level pathway at CFC is now like the absolute trump card on that front. And another thing they're going to have to worry about is a bunch of former employees partnering up with FC Alliance out of Knoxville for their own academy here.
Yeah.
Like they're going to get squeezed both ways.
Yeah, but so that was a real. It was heart-wrenching because you saw teams just get ripped apart, and kids who've been playing with a coach for. We talked to AJ, my younger one, AJ's coach several times, and we were just like, listen, we're not really worried about the level of soccer. He's not going to be a D1, like a D1 scholarship. We know that by now. And so, we're just going to stick here. And it was just really rough. But the really frustrating things I hear from people who think they know, about the split was, things like when people would say things like, well, the academy, realize the academy was such a cluster. We're going to move over to East Ridge because their academy is going to be so much more, better run. And I'm like, do you not realize that the people that you had a problem with running the academy are the people running the East Ridge Academy? I'm not going to mention any names, but
sure.
If people who are listening had kids in the academy, you know who I'm talking about. I never understood the problems that we had at CFCA at the time. They all left, it was rough. It wasn't as bad as it was rough because at this time he was talking about hurting the kids.
That's the biggest thing. I think I've said it 3 times so far today. Like people that want control and power were the ones making decisions, and those that didn't have control and didn't have power, and especially these kids, were the ones that suffered.
Yeah.
And some of that is just simply unforgivable. And I also think like when you have the basis, the community support that we did and do, it helps you weather those types of things. Because the whole project over there was built on fraud and lies. And that catches up eventually. There's a reason why everyone's coming back. There's a reason why I fully believe that everyone will come back one day. The writing's on the wall. And we don't need to go through like the whole rest of this thing. I think there are several key events, because I've said now that if we do this podcast in 2020, 2021, it's different than what the podcast we're actually recording today. There are 4 key events kind of between the Soccer Wars, that initial year or so, and today, that have dramatically changed the outlook for the soccer war in Chattanooga. One of them, and these all occur during the tenure of Jeremy Allenbaugh, friend of the podcast, legend, and now, what is he, president of USL Championship?
He works at some place in Tampa. He works down in Tampa somewhere.
Yeah, I've never quite understood where he worked, but it's just someplace.
Yeah.
All of these things happened during his tenure at CFC. One, this soccer war absolutely galvanized to the gills a certain CFC founder, board member, Tim Kelly, to decide that he wanted to run for mayor. Then he spent his own money and won resoundingly. And then to follow it up, 4 years later, he won re-election with an absolutely absurd number.
80%.
85.
85.
With so many votes that I'm not sure that guy's family voted for him.
So that's thing number one. By the way, he won his runoff, runoff election. There's the first round. Nobody got 50%, although he was the leader after the first round. They do a runoff election afterwards. He won that runoff, I think, with 62 something like percent of the vote. That runoff election occurred on the night of the CFC opener of 2021, the Legends Cup game versus LA Force.
Yeah.
He's getting his I think he's getting his congratulatory call, as a goal is being scored.
I forgot. Yeah, he did find out.
He was actually in the stands right afterwards at the end of, towards the end of the game.
That's right. I forgot about that.
That's thing number one. Thing number two is that Davis Grizzard went from being a minority owner
As part of the Rays.
as part of the Rays to becoming or deciding, I think, is a more accurate term, deciding that he would take on a bigger responsibility and become the team's principal and primary team owner.
Opposed to Tim Kelly
operating the team was operating at that point in time once Tim Kelly won the mayorship. It was the blind trust was technically owning the team.
Yeah.
Because for U.S. soccer things, you have to have one person worth a certain amount of money or minimum certain amount of money on the hook if things on the paperwork.
Yeah. So Davis steps up at some point later in that year to become the primary team owner. NISA, which was the league we were in at the time, NISA proved itself over the course of almost immediately to for several years to be utterly incapable of being better than the absolute awful that it was. Although it gave us a platform to be a professional team and to really grow into being a professional team, it was an unmitigated disaster. And I think we all know that.
Yeah, anyone who could left.
But anyone that could, Miami after the fall of 2019 left immediately. Oakland after the 2020 fall bubble season. Detroit after 2021. Everybody got out or folded. But anyone who could get out got out. CFC was in a unique position back then because we didn't have the clear-cut option of, oh, well, let's just go to USL Championship like the other three had.
Why was that, Matthew?
Well, because the game is not about soccer. The game is about territory rights.
And somebody in Eastridge owns the territory rights for all USL leagues.
Yeah, and by the way...
And don't forget, USL tried to kill us.
Yeah, the fourth thing here is that the city of Chattanooga negotiated an agreement to redevelop and build a baseball stadium at Wheeling Foundry and US Pipe. Which is extremely important in the grand scheme of things because all of a sudden now there is another stadium development with what looks to be, I think I've seen in the articles, $1 billion of investment that is planned around the stadium area.
Does that seem like more than 125 to you? I'm not real good at math, but
It was like that is truly those four moments like together really have signified the end.
Well, I think you've got to have a fifth, and as soon as you have to say that Next Pro coming into existence and
us joining up.
and opening it to independent teams.
Yes.
I mean, without gave us a soft landing space,
A stable platform from which to continue to build CFC.
I will posit something a little bit more strongly, but like it gave us the end game.
Yeah,
The end game is not in USL.
right.
If you believe like I do that like
The merger.
USL is building towards a merger,
Stop calling it a merger. It's going to be a buyout.
I know that.
it's
but
the same thing.
Yeah, but it's whatever.
It's the Jesus puppy. It's the same thing. Like American Airlines merged with US Airways. Guess what it is? American Airlines. Delta merged with Northwest. It's Delta. Like mergers and acquisitions is the same thing. It's just, who's left at the end of the day.
Plus, mergers it's more
It's
fun.
just more fun. MLS Next Pro gave us the platform to continue to do our thing, and it also gave us the reason to like take our thing even further beyond what it was in NISA. And you see this now. If you drive by on Highway 27, on the other side of the road, on the other side of the highway from the stadium, you see like CFC HQ being built now. It is on track for completion by the end of the year. There is like player housing included. There's going to be, I think, like retail or like restaurant bar type thing. Like I think on the rooftop is what they're looking at. I think there's plans for some sort of like gym, weight training facility on the first floor. Sage Hill offices, CFC offices, player housing. I think there's one more thing, like retail-ish commercial for the first floor. Like it's a game changer, and it'll also mark the completion of something, which is relevant.
Yeah, there's two interstates you can drive by, and like in 2025, it's a whole different story from a few years ago, where like when the Red Bull Stadium started in Eastridge, you saw a soccer-specific stadium, and if you were real honest with yourself, you went, "Man, I really want one of those."
Oh, absolutely.
And then
Yeah.
as time has gone on, there's nothing being done to it. It still remains half built. As far as I can tell, there's not a single other tenant there other than the soccer team.
There's not.
And you have a big development downtown for the lookouts so that anybody coming in is almost certainly going to put their money there. It's
Quite literally stuck in the mud. And
Stuck in the wetland.
if you talk to let's just be honest here. Like let's talk about it. And like we've gone a very long time and we're starting to wrap up now. If you talk to people like whisper, hush, hush in commercial real estate world, they know something's up. Like there's no for sale sign sitting there, advertising to the world, although they've got a great opportunity with the video board. But like something is going on there, and it's only a matter of time. And I think they know it. I think that's why you see so little investment put in into the team, into the stadium, into literally anything else. I think that's why you see just so little care. I think that's why Mitch Martino is no longer working there. He disappeared off the website in the front office sometime between September and November of 2024. And that's why Sean McDaniel's no longer there. Like what was promised to him is not being done. And I would argue will never be done. A long line of promises that were broken. Maybe the only maybe the only promise that Martino actually kept in this whole time was that he was going to take Chattanooga soccer to the next level. It just wasn't his team. It galvanized support in the city. It strengthened our bonds in the community. And although it was incredibly painful and legitimately awful for people going on, war is hell.
And we lost plenty of good people.
We lost so many people.
We lost so many good people. Here's just a little...
It's never... Sometimes you have to fight a war, and we did. But like those come at immense personal cost. And a lot of people checked out because they didn't want to be a part of it. It wasn't like for them.
Yeah.
We fought for our community because it was our community. It was ours.
And it was worth it.
There were a lot of casual people that got turned off to the whole notion of soccer in this country, at least in Chattanooga.
Because of the negativity of...
Because like the negativity, the war itself, it just sent them away.
And if you're sitting here and you're like, oh, the negativity, you shouldn't have been so negative. They were trying to kill the thing we loved. We had to fight back in every way we could. And it is a real bummer, as you said, war is hell. It is a real bummer, the people we've lost. And I hope that at some point in the near future, the East Ridge project is wrapped up and they can put a Walmart in there or whatever should be in there. And we can go back to, I'm hoping, the next, because as we talked about, CFC for the first 10 and for the next 90. Like
that was the slogan of the 2019 season.
And we desperately need to go back to those beautiful, good vibes and put this period behind us. And that's out of yours and mine and Jim's control. But to me, for the first time ever, it looks like the writing's on the wall. Because whatever happens, this is something you've been telling me all week since the game was announced. Whatever happens on Wednesday night, it is going to be a very small blip. And even though I would give up a playoff berth, not a championship, but a playoff berth next year in order to win that game because I'm a sick man with feelings I can't shake, it won't matter 10 years from now.
It'll just be another team that CFC played. It doesn't exist anymore.
In the grand scheme of things,
CFC will go back Thursday morning to making Chattanooga a better place through soccer. And East Ridge, as you put it,
one day closer to folding.
There you go, coping again. You're just coping.
Copium, baby.
Now, let me say this. I have said over and over again here on this podcast that everyone comes home eventually. It will be harder for some folks that are still left to come home because of what they've done or who they are. It will be harder for some of us to accept their return. But my offer, at least from me, is that CFC is fundamentally in a better place than it was. None of what we've built today, none of which, like the security and we aren't where we are today, which is stronger than ever. That doesn't happen without all of this. We won. It's done. There'll be a soccer game. Someone will win. Someone will lose. And soccer's about territory rights, and it's not about the game on the field, so it doesn't matter. We won. My message to those who are still left is come back when you're ready. Come back home whenever you're ready. That can be, if you're an academy coach, that can be this summer. If you're in the stands, that can be, there'll be a home game the Saturday after the Wednesday game.
There'll be one April too.
Yeah.
It's not too late to put on blue.
Yeah. You can come back on Wednesday. You can come back next year. You can wait until they're gone before you come back. That's fine. But come back home. Because there's a long line of people that have done your path and have come back. And I think it matters how you win. And I think we owe it to the community to put this behind us. I think we owe it to ourselves that a community united is far greater, stronger, whatever, than a community divided. And I recognize that the community is, 95% blue. There's still a sliver. That's fine. But I want it 100%. And I want everyone to come home when they're ready. And that will be a controversial opinion among CFC fans, I'm sure. But when the institution of the Eastridge Red Bulls are dead and we're the last one standing, I think everyone should come home. And if I could offer a message to Bob himself, thanks, man. We couldn't have done it without you. And I know you don't do partnerships. And I know you're a go it alone kind of guy. But it's precisely that which is why things went awry for you here in town. And you're going to need some help getting out of it. So let us help you. Let us help you find a buyer. Call Tampa. They'll find a place for your franchise. We'll help you find someone for the land. You can move on with your life. And we can move on with ours, which is, at the end of the day, to make Chattanooga a better place through soccer.
Feels like a good place to end it.
It does. Yeah. 10-10, no notes.
If you're listening to this for the first time, thank you. We hope you'll come back, but you probably shouldn't because we are three dumb nerds talking about all sorts of soccer things. At minimum, I hope we see you April 2 in the stands. Whatever happens, go CFC.